Hello, and welcome to this episode where we will be talking about the year 2009 and what that brought to video games. Before we do that, though, we're going to go over some games in my little segment here that we call Roulette of Gaming, where I'll pick three games at random from a list that I got going on and discuss them to some extent as much as how familiar I am with them. And then my hope is that I'll be able to put up some kind of a gameplay footage of it on my YouTube shorts on my channel for Arcade Amigo. And so hopefully everyone has had a great week. We're rolling on here towards springtime. I gotta say, I feel like I've been kind of lucky here living in the Northwest where, the Northwest is, we get snow, right? It's not, it's certainly not uncommon that we don't get, or I'm sorry, that we get snow here in this area, but we kind of seem to miss this cold front that sort of hit the United States. And so hopefully if you are someone out there that got hit with some snow or, really cold weather, that you're powering through it and hopefully here's some warmer days to come. But let's get going on here. This is not a weather channel, but just, well, again, we're more talking about video games here. So if you are new here, basically what I do is, again, so we select these games of Roulette Gaming. Then after that, I'll touch base on some modern gaming news. And so while I'm not going to be completely up to date on everything, I do try to catch as much information as I can just to have a general discussion about it all. And so my hope is with this podcast is that you're taking it not so much like a up to the minute factual news video game channel, but more just like you're just talking to a friend of yours about video games in general. And so there can definitely be some back and forth if I get some of my information wrong. Again, I'm just sort of jotting down information throughout the week as I come across it and just try to relay the information as best as I can. But again, just more to so you can kind of catch up a little bit on the news if you're, someone that's busy and just wants something in the background to listen to that you don't necessarily have to watch a video. But definitely feel free to converse in any way, right, and all about anything that I say on this episode here. So with the podcast, or I'm sorry, and then after that, we will get into the main meat of this podcast, which is for the year 2009. And, 2009 for me was a really great year. And actually, I feel like it's a bit of an underrated year. I don't know. I guess I haven't really seen this year stacked up too high when it comes to other years that are considered like some of the best in gaming. But for me, this is sort of like 2007, but I almost want to say better because a lot of the games that came out in 2007 saw an updated version of one of those games. They're like a sequel of sorts, only done better. And I don't know. There's just a lot of games that came out this year that I thought were really cool. But we'll get into that all here soon. So let's start off with Roulette of Gaming. And so once again, I'd already picked out the games here previously. So I'll just go over here the ones that I picked. And so the first one is for Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow. And, this is a game I would love to revisit the series again because I got kind of far into the first Splinter Cell game. I beat this one here, Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, and I also beat Chaos Theory. But this particular one, though, Pandora Tomorrow, I don't have a whole lot of memory of it. I just remember that I beat it back then when it came out, and let's see, this would have been roughly about 2003 or 2004. I don't know if I talked about this game in my previous episode when I was talking about that year in gaming, but either way, this game is really good. For me, it was an improvement off of the first one, where it took the same great gameplay, just now where it's a different story, though. And from what I recall, you don't really need to play, a previous one in the series, as it's sort of like James Bond in a way, where yeah, it's the same character, but each story is kind of its standalone. At least that's the impression that I got. I could be wrong on that, but I do remember I really liked this one. You still get the same great graphics and lighting and shadow effects. I just felt that the gameplay was a little bit more user-friendly on this one than in the first one. And just remembered, I just enjoyed this one overall a lot more. As again, I do recall that I did end up beating this one here back then. And definitely a great game. And this was another one that played better on the original Xbox, as just the way it could do the shadow and the lighting on it was truly an improvement over what the PlayStation 2, and I believe this one also came out on the GameCube as well too. I don't quite recall, but either way, I would say that the Xbox One is the one to get on this. But yeah, great game overall, and really wish it would re-release this game somehow. But if you can, I believe it's still backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X, and really great game. it's more stealth espionage action. The story is still very much like a Tom, like a Tom Clancy, obviously, right? Novel, and yeah, just a great time with it. The actor Michael Ironside still plays a really great Sam Fisher in it, and yeah, just overall a really great game. I just don't recall a lot of it, so this will be kind of fun, maybe capturing some footage of it, so I can sort of reignite my memory on how awesome of a game this was back then. Coming up next up, though, is for Doom 2. And so this is the sequel to the original Doom, and this is another game I'm not too familiar with. As far as I can tell, I know I picked it up at one point to play a little bit of it. I think I have it on the Switch, actually. And it's more of Doom, just as far as I can tell, just kind of more of the same, only different levels and all. I don't know how much of an improvement it made over the original Doom, as it kind of looks the same, it plays the same from what I can tell. But it was more Doom, and that didn't seem like it was necessarily a bad thing, as the first one was incredibly popular, right? And so, just to have a sequel that came out pretty quickly after this one. So I want to say, I think the first Doom came out in 1993, and I think this one maybe came out the year afterwards, or 94 or 95, give or take. But either way, I'm sure it's a great game. I just don't have a whole lot of experience with it. So this will be another one here that will be fun capturing some footage on and trying to get a little bit of information on it. But the last one that I had picked here, and we are going back to, well, pretty much you can consider this the introduction of video games, the genesis of video games, where it all started, for the most part, and that is the old school OG Pong. Yep, that's the game where all it is just there's these simple white lines on the screen, and to the left and the right, and you're just moving them up and down as you're bouncing a ball, bouncing back and forth this pixelated ball, and it's sort of like, I guess you can say, like almost like a table tennis in a way. And I mean, and then you're just trying to beat your opponent, right? I think whoever gets to 11 points or so wins. And yeah, I mean, very simple concept, and but this simple concept though really started the framework for a lot of video games going forward. Because this game here, so I want to say, I could be wrong on some of my dates. Like I said, I'll try to record or gather some information as I'm recording a short on it. But it was, I think, let me see how much I know. Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn, I believe, were the ones behind this. And so I know that, I mean, it was one of the first, I think it's considered like the first main successful video game out there that was, had some market relevancy to it. I believe it was in the arcades where, it had this big old yellow cabinet. And then also eventually you would see like the tabletop version of it too. And I mean, the game was incredibly popular. And then eventually when they came out with basically like the first generation of video game consoles, so there was like the one from Magnavox, it's basically like Pong clones where you put like an overlay on your TV, and then you can play, for example, like soccer or hockey, right? But it's more or less the same game, more or less, is my understanding of it. I've never actually got my hands on an actual first generation, game console from Magnavox, but that's my understanding of it, right? But the concept comes from this game Pong here, and yeah, I mean, it was incredibly popular at the time, and I mean, for the longest time, you would still see this at the bars and restaurants. I mean, I remember still when I would go to the bars, and this would have been like, oh geez, a little while ago, but like like early 2000s, I was still seeing some Pong video game consoles out there in the bars and all, back in my bar hopping days. And so it was a lot of fun to play back then. And, it's still fun, right? It's very basic in concept, but I think it started a few things. Was, first of all, introducing gamers or, people, right, that the simple concept of, bouncing a ball back and forth, right, can be really fun, and so to kind of like kill time on it and all, but also introducing us to what video games could be, right, where you're controlling something on the screen. And I can only imagine how innovative that was back then. And yeah, I mean, we owe a lot to Pong. It's, it's, again, simple in concept now, but it definitely has laid the groundwork for, some of the stuff that we have nowadays. And it's pretty incredible just to how far we've come. And this is where you can say it all started. I mean, my understanding is that there was it was a game called Space War that was technically, I think that's like considered the first actual video game. But as far as like had any market relevancy and all that. I'm pretty sure it's Pong, and yeah, I mean, so much to owe this game that we owe this game to for giving us this great hobby here. And yeah, the OG Pong, good stuff. And I mean, you can play this in a lot of different ways here. One way to get it is like if you get the Atari compilation that came out a few years ago, or I think it was like the 50th anniversary for Atari. That's a great compilation to get, and it has this one here also, right? That you can play. That's a lot of fun. Let's start getting into the modern gaming news here. And so, starting off, I wanted to talk about just some games specifically, and wanted to start off by giving some thoughts here on Resident Evil Requiem. So the game came out officially. Well, I guess it comes out officially today, but where I live at, I was able to play it at 9 p.m. last night. So played it for about roughly about an hour and a half or so, and yeah, I really like it so far. Like I said, I haven't played too much of it, but first impression is really good. It's it's definitely, as I was playing this game, I started thinking about how I feel like we don't get this enough in games nowadays anymore, where it's something that feels fresh and unique. Where, I mean, Resident Evil's been around for a while, and this game here, I mean, it's taking the first person player perspective, right, from like Resident Evil 7 or 8, along with like the third person over the shoulder camera with like Resident Evil Remake 2 and 3 and 4. So nothing completely new, and you're part of the game. You're playing Leon Kennedy, who he's been around for a while, but just the setting, the story, and all, it still felt pretty fresh and unique to itself. And so like I said, that's only about an hour and a half that I played into it, but it definitely has me intrigued with the mystery that's going on in the game, and it definitely seems creepy. And I'm really digging it so far, and so I'm excited to get back in there and play it. I was just kind of tired last night, so I only got about an hour and a half into it. But yeah, I mean, really good. It looks up. I mean, it plays really good and looks really good. And I mean, oh my God, this game looks stunning. I gotta say that it's probably one of the more impressive games I've ever seen of all time. It's truly incredible. And so I was watching a little bit of like some video footage or reviews, like Digital Foundry and all, and so it was speculated that this game might be running on the new PSSR 2.0 that's been rumored. And I just saw earlier this morning that yeah, they pretty much confirmed that Mark Cerny had like some kind of an update about when this new PSSR 2.0 is going to release sometime, I guess, next month. So they made it pretty much official. And I mean, the game looks incredible. I mean, it's so I'm just playing it on the with the ray tracing on. And I'm not really one for like where I can really tell the difference on ray tracing and all, but there's like this segment in this towards the start of the game. If you've watched any videos on this and all, you've probably already seen it, where you're just kind of walking through like a downtown area, and holy shit! I mean, it looks incredible. Now, granted, it's a very localized area. It's, I'm sure that there's not like, I mean, it's not like an open world area, right? So they're probably able to really push the graphics to quite the extreme, right? Not because they have a smaller playground, so to speak, right, to work with, but it looks incredible. I mean, it looks basically realistic. I mean, yeah. Once you get to the character models, some of them look really good. Some of them I did notice look a little shiny, and all. But I mean, I will say like Grace, she looks good for the most part, but there's some features of her that look a little plasticky. Our boy Leon Kennedy, though, he looks good though. And I mean, it's just incredible. Like, but like when it comes to the environment, I mean, might as well pretty much be realistic, right? I mean, obviously, if you get really close up to something, it's like, okay, you can tell that it's obviously polygons. But wow, and then the rain effect that's going on, and then the reflections, like in the car mirror or windows and all. I mean, it really looks incredible. Definitely is a really good first impression. And yeah, I mean, I just like I said, at a quick glance, and all this looks really stunning. And if this is what's to come with PSSR 2, then starting to make I still feel like the PlayStation 5 Pro is not a necessity, but it is maybe, if you continue to get products like this, will make it feel a little bit more justifiable, right, in my purchase. But yeah, I mean, but then, like I said, the game itself looks really fun. I'm really excited to go back into it. just does seem kind of creepy though. There was one part that kind of made me jump a little bit last night, but yeah, it's love it though. I love it, love it, love it. And also another thing too. I mean, apparently the game is doing pretty well as physical copies have apparently sold out pretty much everywhere. So good. This is good. Resident Evil still in it. Capcom still firing on all cylinders, and so this is pretty exciting. But something that is not firing on all cylinders is Square Enix. Oh, so to quote, what is it? God of War, what have you done to my boy? So Final Fantasy VII, the version that came out on Steam. So we talked about it, I think, a few weeks ago, where it was getting some kind of an upgrade when they're replacing the 2013 version and upgrading to some new version. We didn't really quite know the specifics of it. So here's some information that I got on this. So it seems like it's mostly bad, at least the reviews on it. So Steam, right? If you're reviewing the game, it'll sort of show you like, is it mostly positive, mixed reviews, or mostly negative and such. Last I saw was that mostly negative. And so it looks like the game had some few issues. So starting off, I guess when the game was first launched for about an hour or so is what I read, is that the game file wasn't actually like in the folder, like, where you download the game or something like that. They fixed it fairly quickly, but still, that's like, okay, that's odd. But then also apparently it seemed like the auto speed was activated, and there's like this really bad smoothing filter that just makes everything look just that really ugly looking smooth filter that they use sometimes on some games, and so it doesn't make it look very well. um and last I checked, I don't know, I've seen like some conflicting reports on this, but as far as for like, or at least, I'm sorry, at least to try to get rid of that smoothing filter, looks like the mods still aren't available for that. So yeah, I mean, it kind of, I don't know, seems a bit of a bummer, right? And another interesting thing is that, so they had originally said that the save data wasn't going to be compatible with the 2013 version, but apparently it is. And it seems like all you have to do is just move it over to a different folder, on your Steam or PC or whatever, right? So, ultimately, a little bit of a workaround, but it can be done, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it seems like things that they're probably going to be end up fixing. The mods might eventually become available for it, but at least at the start, the launch was pretty botched, and uh, you know, yeah, but I mean, it has like I guess some cool things about it is that it does autosave, and then also it has like the cheats, right? Like the speed and the, I think, to like where no encounters, and then where you can have like your full life and limit breaks all fully activated. So it's got those there and all, which is cool and all. But just, some of these half-ass jobs that have been going on, it's a little frustrating. But I mean, I'm set with how I have to play Final Fantasy VII, but just still though, it's a little frustrating, right? That things like that end up happening. Another thing though that had, some people been disappointed was the Panzer Dragoon 2 Zwei demo. Uh Zwei, I think, however you pronounce that. I played it, I actually even put a little thing on my YouTube channel, and I didn't half mind it, right? It's the Saturn version is a particular version, right, and all, and it was definitely doing some things with the technology back then, and if anything, I mean, like, my wish would be that whenever they do like a remake or a remaster of some sort, is that they include the original. um, but I don't know. I'm sure that maybe if they did that, they might feel like, well, a lot of people are going to feel, well, the original's better, right? It might hurt their sales. I don't know that for sure, but that would be my hope. But obviously, that's probably not going to happen. But I didn't half mind it. There was a few things though that I did notice, is that like when you're trying to lock onto the enemy, it doesn't seem to be as responsive as the Saturn one. So that's definitely a bit of a downer. But if they can button that up, and I don't know, we'll see, right? I'm interested in it enough. I know that when the first Panzer Dragoon game came out, that game had a bit of a weird launch where the controls of the dragon were off, and it had some other bugs here and there. And ultimately, for the most part, they fixed a lot of it, where I feel like it's a perfectly fine playable version. I actually kind of enjoy that version. And so for, I'm hoping that they at least do this with, Panzer Dragoon 2's way, Zwei. Obviously, the graphic style and all, they're probably not going to be able to fix that. I mean, that's already so far along, right, that I don't think they can do much with it. But if they can button up the gameplay and and improve the responsiveness of the lock on feature, for me, I'm interested in it still, and not exactly the best remake that I could have hoped for this game, but I feel like it's still not going to be too bad. But I guess I have to see the full end product, because admittedly, the stage that they selected, stage two, while it's a fun, iconic stage for as far as Panzer Dragoon goes, it's also a bit bland as far as its color scheme and all. So I really want to see like the other stages, right? I think that's really going to be the defining thing. Like for example, stage three, I want to see what that's all about. What is the last boss going to look like, and things like that. And there seem to be some issues with the sound also too. But like I said, I'm interested enough to play it just because I'm such a geek towards the original Panzer Dragoon too. But we'll see. One thing that was cool though that they announced, that I kept seeing like videos of it, but I guess I wasn't really like thinking it was a big deal. But then finally I clicked on it, and it's called a Marvel Maximum Collection. I was like, what is this? Right? It was from Limited Run Games that they're just doing some kind of a release. Well, holy shit. So they're doing the X-Men arcade game from back in the day, where you can play, I think, like up to 4 players. It was from Konami. It came back, I think, like in the late '80s, early '90s or so, right at the height of like the when beat 'em ups were really popular. And it's coming out with a bunch of like Marvel games from like the 8-bit and 16-bit days, from like the Silver Surfer game, the really hard one from the Nintendo, to like the Spider-Man Separation Anxiety and Maximum Carnage games, and so like some other Nintendo games. The Captain America and the Avengers beat 'em up game. I mean, those are kind of I was just thinking about it. I think I actually mentioned that a few weeks ago, that it's hard to get these games back on here just because of the license. But wow, that was kind of came out of nowhere, and maybe it's due to the with Doomsday coming out this year, right? That their Marvel's just all on the hype train trying to release a bunch of stuff, and I'm all for it. I think that's cool. Anytime we can get re-releases of games that had licenses on them before, I think that's good stuff. Something that's hard to get these games re-released. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I believe it just said coming soon, so we don't know the exact date, and it seems to be coming out on pretty much everything. So yeah, very excellent. That's cool. I mean, they're old games, but still, you just never know nowadays, right? I just hope they don't botch them somehow. But very exciting news. So that's cool. And another cool thing too, also speaking of like these kind of games, like beat 'em ups, and also for the He-Man in the Masters of the Universe, Pearl of Destruction. So that 2D beat 'em up game that we talked about some weeks ago or months ago, that looks like it's kind of like the Marvel Cosmic Invasion and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles style. So we finally got a release date, and it's coming out on the 28th of April of 2026. I am all over that. Super excited for it. The movie too. I'm curious. We'll see. The trailer kind of sold me on it, kind of not. I don't know. I'm a big He-Man fan from back in the day, and so I guess I just need to see more of it. But the game, though, this game looks amazing. I have no doubt that it's going to be good. But interestingly, though, it seems that Echo the Dolphin is going to be getting some kind of a remaster of some sort. And so my understanding of the story was, as about a year ago or so, it was announced that it was going to be coming out, but it wasn't really quite sure. It's some kind of a remaster of some sort, that not only the first Echo the Dolphin game, but also like the Tides of Time, so the sequel that came out, both games originally on the Genesis. But looks like so there's a really popular magazine in Japan called Famitsu, and looks like they had a bit of a article on this, and where, I mean, it seems like it's coming out. Well, the system that they had listed that it's coming out on is on the Switch. So something about that, you can change the graphics on the fly to like the new improved versions and keep the old school style. So we'll see. I guess I'm not someone that really got into the Echo the Dolphin games back in the day. I heard that they can be extremely frustrating, but we'll see. We'll see. I do like that they've been porting or remastering some of these like old Sega games, like the Wonder Boy, the Dragon's Trap, or Alex Kidd. So we'll see what happens with this one. One thing that's been a bit frustrating for a lot of people, and I talked a little bit about this last week, and that's for the Xenoblade Chronicles X upgrade. So I immediately got that upgrade, and I started playing it. And so when I first started playing it, I played it on my big TV in the living room. And so I played it for about an hour or so, right, just to test it out. And I mean, immediately I was like, wow, it looks sharp. It looks the 60 frames per second is pretty nice. When I got into like the actual like in the open world and all, I did kind of notice I was like everything looks a bit shiny, right? And I didn't half mind it too bad, but I did notice that though. But I was like, okay, well, I was still kind of like, oh, I mean, whatever, I could tolerate it, right? It seems though that a lot of people didn't like that though, and not only that, that it seems like it's in the handheld version that it's a lot more noticeable. I haven't had a chance to play it on handheld, so I can't speak for that there. But apparently, it was so bad that Nintendo ended up even doing some refunds for some customers. And oh man, again, it goes back to like just like what is going on. I mean, with a lot of times you get these emulators and mods that are coming out there from just fans, and they can do a really good job on some of these kind of things. And it seems like just these big companies can't even seem to get it right. But for what I've played of it, like I said, right, I was playing it on in dock mode. I didn't mind it enough where I would be seeking a refund. But it is very frustrating though, and I'm hoping that they can patch it up and get it all a lot better. As I was wanting to play through this game, but just never really got more of a chance to play it last week. And then now was Resident Evil Requiem out. I probably won't for a while, but so hopefully by the time I get back to it, it'll be patched up. If not, maybe I just might need to stick to dock mode, while playing this one here. Wolverine though got a release date, so it looks like that is coming out on the 15th of September of 2026. So that's very exciting news. Really excited about that game. I'm starting to kind of get back into Marvel stuff. I've been slowly watching a lot of the Marvel movies. My goal is to have them all finished by the end of the year when Doomsday comes out, because I think that comes out in December. I'm not, I mean, I'm being very cautiously optimistic about that movie. I don't think, I mean, well, for me, what they did with Infinity War and Endgame, with the whole lead up to that, in the Infinity Saga was incredible. Not every movie was a hit, but I feel like if you look at it as a whole, I think it was a pretty big achievement in movie making, right? And I loved it. I think a lot of that magic is gone now, though, but I'd still would be lying though if I said I didn't have an interest in it, though. So pretty excited about it overall. But yeah, so Wolverine, that'll be just another cool thing, right, to have played, hopefully before the movie comes out. But another interesting story that started popping off, though, is that, so this is interesting. I guess this is one of those things where this is kind of more of a speculation, but seems to be that this could end up being the case, at least from some people in the know. But so Sony PlayStation, so they've for the past what 4 or 5 years, I don't know, something like that. Some of their first party games have been coming out on PC. So like what is it, Horizon, Spider-Man, God of War, and so it seems like Sony, because they even acquired a studio to help them with these ports, and it seemed like for a while that Sony was going to release like their main first party games on console, and then maybe roughly about a year or so afterwards, right, release them on PC. At least that seemed to be the thought. But according to like some pretty prominent figures in the video game industry, as far as like reporting on the news, it was Jason Schreier. So he's I don't know, he works for Bloomberg or so. I just keep seeing his name pop up. That he's apparently a pretty popular journalist. And then what's his name? John Linderman. I'm probably butchering his name, but the dude from Digital Foundry. Both of them have speculated that it seems like that's what they've been hearing, that Sony's going to be going away from that and just kind of stick more to their exclusives on console. Again, it's what my understanding is, not that they've confirmed it. It just seems like that's what they've been hearing, right? So I want to take this quite as a definitive, that this is what they're doing. But that's interesting. I mean, doesn't affect me personally because again, I don't really play much on PC, but I can imagine if you're a PC player and you started getting into some of the Sony games, I mean that's got to be a bit frustrating. I don't know. I mean, it seems like the PC market is very lucrative, so I don't know what the decision on that might be. Maybe because they're seeing what Xbox is doing, and maybe they're just trying to get a one punch on them to have exclusives now on their system. Maybe go to like what Nintendo's been doing. I have no idea, but we'll see how this story develops and if anything more comes of that there. But Xbox, though, you know, a lot came out on Xbox, right? And I've been trying to keep up with the story as much as possible, but basically, from what it seems like, right, just kind of like to encapsulate everything that's been happening. So we talked about last time how Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond are out, new CEO comes in, and what is going on now, right? So from what it seems like, Phil Spencer, it pretty much seems like he was forced to retire, kind of like a hey, retire gracefully or we're going to fire you kind of situation. It's what it sounds like. Sarah Bond, I mean, I think I saw something that it said like she was sort of like had already been prepping this new CEO, but then not. But then she was, but then she just kind of like left really quick. So it kind of seems like she also either got fired or resigned, right? One or the other. And so from a lot of things that have been coming out, it seems like she was just a really difficult person to work with. She was pretty much the main person behind the whole "this is an Xbox" campaign that didn't really sit well with a lot of people. A lot of employees supposedly have been coming out, complaining about her. I say supposedly because this is all, information that's coming out, but I don't know how much of it has been 100% confirmed. And so I don't know. There's a lot of he said, she said, but it definitely feels like Microsoft was like, we need a clean house and make some big changes. And then with this new CEO, so there was a bit of a controversy where she had started like a Twitter account and started like conversing with people, and it seemed like she was just saying things that seemed a little too convenient, like let's bring back the dashboards or how about exclusives and things like that. And the way she was responding to people were catching on. It's like, is this AI that you're using to make these posts? She did come out saying that it like was it something about that she didn't think it was this her gamer account was going to blow up as much as it did, and that it's something I think like a family member was running her account or something to that effect. But ultimately, it seemed like it wasn't her specifically making these posts. It's already kind of set a bad tone in people's, with people, right? That who she might be. But she did have an interview, and she said some things though that. It sounds like they're definitely trying to. She's basically analyzing a lot of data, trying to see what the best course of action is for Xbox. Kind of made it seem like maybe they might still be doing another console for the next generation, but then also given her background in AI and all, I don't know, makes you question that. So a lot of we don't know yet, but we'll see. I mean, Xbox, it's kind of odd what they're doing now, and I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like just the more competition there is, the better. And if Xbox can sort of find some kind of a niche right now within the gaming industry where they can become successful, I think that'll work out the best for everyone. Where right now we have Nintendo doing Nintendo, and I mean that's kind of another story whether they're successful or not, in doing Nintendo stuff right now. But Sony just has sort of positioned the stuff as being the default system to get. So where can Xbox fit in all this? And I guess we'll see, right? It might be maybe in their best interest to be third party, kind of like the way Sega ended up doing, but we'll see. The difference with Sega and Microsoft is that Microsoft has super deep pockets, right? Where Sega not so much, and so they can afford to take some hits, right? And they have. I mean, any other company would have gone under, I'm sure, but for some reason, Microsoft keeps the Xbox brand alive, and I don't know. We'll see. For me, I do have some games invested in the Xbox ecosystem. Unfortunately, a lot of it digitally. So at the very least, I just hope that I can continue playing those games in some form factor going forward, and I mean, and then the rest, whatever, right? But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a different Xbox, and maybe some good will come out of this, right? We don't know with her and Matt Booty now seemingly in charge of it all, but a lot of it is just we'll just have to wait and see, right? What all comes of this. But a little follow up also on the story that from last week, also for the whole thing with Blue Point. And so, what's been kind of coming out on this? And again, there's a lot of stories coming out. I don't know how much of it is true and all. Obviously, I'm just going off of what I'm seeing and reading on the internet. And but it seems to be what's been coming out was that Blue Point did actually pitch a God of War game, a live service game to Sony, and that's and then it is what ended up getting greenlit, right? But obviously, it was just apparently too much for them to try to work on. And then, well, I mean, apparently it seems like why they got, dismantled as a company. I don't know 100% of all of that, but from what it sounds like, though, now it seems like Blue Point did go up to them right on this. And it also was stated that they had also pitched some other ideas, but that Sony shot them down. What I don't know for sure is if, because see, Blue Point did help with finishing up God of War Ragnarok. My thought is, and I can be completely wrong on this, but my thought is this, right? Because at the same time, too, also, right, going from like a little bit after, you know, the PlayStation 5 was a thing, Sony really started trying to make this push for like live service stuff. And so with that there, it kind of seems like I don't, so some of the ideas that they had pitched to Sony, it wasn't I don't know for sure like if this was done before or after they were working on God of War and they pitched the idea to God of War live service. But from what it sounds like, at least my guess is that given this pedigree of the studio, right, that they're a remake studio, is that it seems like almost my guess is that what if they were all right, well, if we're going to be doing live service stuff, we're already kind of starting to understand God of War because we worked on God of War Ragnarok. Well, I guess can we do like a God of War live service game? And so, and it was it was greenlit, right? So I think a lot of it would be telling is what were these other projects that they had pitched? Was it done before or after God of War? And because if they had pitched some ideas to Sony, like let's say, hey, it was also supposedly leaked that they were going to do a Bloodborne remake, but I don't know the validity of that yet. But I mean, if that was, let's just say if that was the case, right? Like they pitched something like Bloodborne remake or something else, right? Sony shot them all down. But then they're like, all right, well, what about a God of War live service game? Since that's what you guys want. Yeah, let's go with that. I mean, if that was the case, and that's definitely very telling of Sony's management overall, right? Because I mean, it's you're taking a studio that was a remake studio of about 70 people strong to do a live service game, and from my understanding, those live service games takes a lot of manpower to run, and it definitely didn't seem like that was going to be the best bet for them. And eventually, well, they got dismantled. Again, I don't know. I don't know how those events played out exactly, but that's some information that has come out. And either way, I mean, it seems pretty unfortunate and it seems unnecessary, right? And all that they were dismantled like that. But, there's a lot of frustration with that, right? But here's something though that Matt Piscatella, so the dude that he knows a lot of like numbers and statistics and all, but I mean, on one end, it's frustrating, right? I mean, it's like, why do they keep wanting to do these live service games? Especially with Sony, you guys have like a treasure trove of IPs, and why not trying to bring some of them back or get these studios to work on something original, right? But when you look at like the top 5 games on PlayStation, ranked by total U.S. players for 2025, okay, it's Fortnite, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto 5, Roblox, and Minecraft. You go back to 2024, same exact lineup, same games. Maybe even if you go back further, right? I don't know, right? But I'm definitely not on the side of like the big corporate companies and all. But if you are looking at that data, right, and if you're in the business of making money, and if you're looking at that, well, yeah, that's what you want, right? I mean, obviously, the people want live service stuff. Uh, but I guess and again, I'm not involved in the whole live service gaming sphere, but my thought is like, I mean, you have these games, right, and so you're not really going to pull players away from these games, at least not for an extended period of time. I mean, people that are like the people around me that I know, right, they're that play these games, they're hardcore into them, right? Fortnite, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto 5, Roblox, and Minecraft. I mean, that's their life, right? And cool. I mean, those games are popular for a reason. So if you're going to make some kind of a live service game and you're going to try to pull people away from these games, you really need to do something special. I guess you can lump in there Apex Legend. I keep hearing about that game, right? It's pretty popular too. And I guess Helldivers too. But other than that, though, I mean, it seems like for people that play these games, see, like I tend to be more of a single player game or gamer where I like more, I mean, there's some games that I'll play that I'll keep coming back to, like fighting games or racing games, right, and all. But for the most part, if I'm playing something new, I'm playing like a single player experience, and also, like for example, Resident Evil, right? Or going back to my old classics. But that's me though, right? Where I do like to play a variety of different games. But a lot of people though, they just like to play one game and stick with it, right? Like again, Roblox or Fortnite or those games there, and so they don't bounce around from one game or the other. And the reason for that is these are like endless games. Where like once I'm done with Resident Evil Requiem, it's not like I'm going to keep playing that game over and over and over and over and over. I mean, I'm sure I'll replay it from time to time, but not like say like if it was a live service game. So I mean, realistically, that's time investment, right? That someone's putting into these. That if they were to get into another one, that's a big time commitment as well too. And I don't know if there's a big player base for all that there to have all these multiple live service games out there. And so Sony keeps chasing these, and I mean, not just Sony, a lot of other companies, but right, Sony being like the big one of the big console manufacturers, and I mean, it would seem like you sure have some live service games, no doubt, right? I mean, they're popular. Or there's also that Arc Raiders game too. But once you have those, and if they're making you a lot of money, then also use that money to invest in making some of the single player games, right? And all that also has maybe not as lucrative of a market, but it's still there. Um, but for some reason, though, they really want this live service stuff, and I don't know. It's I mean, I get it why they've been doing it to an extent. I guess just looking at those figures there, but it does kind of suck. And again, it's just the state of the industry where I'm not a big fan of. But here we are, right? And I mean, what are you gonna do? But yeah, I mean, when I saw those games, I was like, yeah, I mean, shit. I mean, those are the games that you always see, right? Again, the Fortnite, Call of Duties, Grand Theft Autos, Roblox, and Minecraft. And when I listen to like kids, for example, like my daughter will always talk about how she wants to play on Roblox, and because that's what all her friends are playing. And yeah, and I mean, that's when we were kids, it was like the Mario games or the and well, I'm talking about me, right? I'm going back to like the '80s, right? But if you were like born in the '90s, like I don't know, Super Mario 64 or Crash Bandicoot, or if you were born in the 2000s, um, I don't know, Super Mario Sunshine, I guess, or Jack and Daxter, right, and Sly Cooper and things like that, right? But single player contained experiences where now it's these endless games, and that is what they're hooked on. Or the like my daughter right now, she's really hooked on this I Am Cat game, and that's what they and don't get. I mean, she still likes to play, like for example, like some of the Mario games still, or Astrobot. Although they started to lose some interest in Astrobot now, but again, if I like, I don't let her play Roblox or Fortnite, but if she were to get on it, like let's say if I would allow that, she would be completely hooked on it, right? And wouldn't really need like for another game. Like I can see that, and that's just to be kind of what happens, with a lot of kids, and so then that's what they grow up with. So we're getting this generation that's growing up with this, and so then by the time they're teenagers and young adults and all this, I mean, it kind of seems like this is what they grew up with. This is their nostalgia, and so just kind of continuing on the trend of these kind of games, or some form of it anyways, right? In 10, 20 years from now or whatever. So I don't know. It's interesting. And, like I said, right before, I've already kind of talked about this a lot, but sort of why I'm starting to wean out of like, excuse me, the more modern gaming stuff, but for stuff like this, but it is what it is. But we're still getting some good stuff, though, right? I mean, for sure. I mean, like I said, Resident Evil Requiem really blew my mind last night when I was playing it. And so unfortunately, we still have companies like Capcom that are still catering to like the hardcore gamer, I guess you can say, or the old school gamer. And kind of bringing in the best of the old and the new. We're keeping a game that feels like fresh, original, but still like very modernized, right? Like I said, the graphics on this, I can't stop raving about the graphics. I was so impressed with it last night. But yeah, either way though, still cool stuff coming out, but the industry is definitely in a uh, particular situation. But still a lot of good stuff though. I mean, a lot of indie games that are out there that are still really cool, and there's still some cool stuff to look forward to, right? Even in the future for video games and all. So not a bad time to be a player for sure, right? And I know a lot of times, there's so much negativity out there with the video game industry, and rightly so. I think that also at the same time it overshadows a lot of like the good stuff that is still out there though still.
Wanted to add a little extra here as I'm in the editing room now, and the editing room, by that I just mean my little office space here. But some of the stories that I had talked about before, there was some developments on them as well too, or just got some recent announcements, right? And all that I wanted to cover it in this week's episode. But so going back to Resident Evil, right? We're talking about how really enjoyed that game, seems to be selling really well and all. Well, I don't know when this was, but and those numbers might have changed, but Resident Evil 9 was at 320,000 peak player count on Steam, which was a considerably higher amount than the highest Resident Evil before, which I think was Resident Evil 4, the remake one. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, I'm so happy that this game is doing really well. Again, I haven't really played much more of it, but a little bit that I did, it definitely has my interest. It seems like, Resident Evil still has it. And this is awesome. This is good news. And, good job for Capcom on kind of showing that how it's done. I mean, bringing out like as far as like the technology, the look of the game looks incredible. It plays good. It, gives the fans of the series what they want. I mean, that's kind of what, what everyone's been wishing for, right? So it's good to know that at least Capcom is still, to an extent, right, and all listening to its players. But another thing too, also that came out, and this is it's interesting, right? And this has to do again with Blue Point. So a recent leak came out, and I didn't quite catch where this leak came from and all, but I just kept seeing it everywhere, right? So I would assume that there's at least some validity to how that this could be potentially true, right? Again, anytime I say like leaks and all, I'm just going off of what I see off of the internet. I'm definitely not anyone in the know in the industry, so I'm literally just regurgitating, right, what you see, in a lot of the major media, the video game medias out there. But basically, it's that. So Blue Point did, according to this leak, so Blue Point did pitch Bloodborne before closure. All right. So Bloodborne has been, I've talked about Bloodborne before a bit, and I do think that the game is cool. I would really like to get into it, but I'm not hugely invested into it, right? But I understand that this game is very popular amongst a lot of players, and it's something that people really want to see come back in some form, right? So I can definitely get that. And so people have been really wanting a remake, mainly because so that we can bump it up to 60 frames per second. Because a game like this, I can imagine it makes a big difference. So Bluepoint has pitched the game to Sony, and Sony at one point actually said yes. But apparently what's happened, though, is that From Software and the creator there, let's see, I'm going to look him up. I forget his name. But so the creator, or the main, I guess, dude there, he's basically been the one saying no. That he's not... he's not wanting to do that, and it could be maybe that because maybe they just want the game to be done in house, right? Or he would be overseeing it quite a bit. But I can imagine From Software is probably pretty busy right now. But yeah, it looks like this is coming from Software. So okay, so it looks like it's Hidetaki Miyazaki. So he's been the president and director there, right, for like a lot of these great From Software games, right, that people have loved a lot, like Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne. And so, yeah, it looks like the decision has actually been coming from him. So, take that for what you will, right? From what I understand, again, if anybody is a hardcore Dark Souls player, Souls-like player, let me know on this. But from what I understand is, I mean, these games that are developed specifically from software, so again, Bloodborne, Sekiro, the Dark Souls games, Elden Ring, they're games that are very beloved for a lot of different reasons, right? Not just because of the lore, the setting and all, but also the combat. And by that, I mean also that they program their ways in a very specific way that really caters to their audience. So I watched this interesting video. It was some time ago, but it was on YouTube, and I don't know, it just came up in my algorithm. I think I just put it on just to have something in the background. But basically, this guy was breaking it down, and this dude seemed to be a pretty big fan of, From Software games. And so he was talking about Demon Souls. and comparing the PS3 Demon Souls version to the PS5 version. Now, the PS5 version, Demon Souls, I got that right. I wanted something on during launch, and it looks incredible, right? And for all intents and purposes, it plays good. But I'm not obviously a big hardcore Souls fan, so when I'm playing, I'm like, yeah, this feels good. It feels better than the PlayStation 3 one, as far as I can tell. But this video was gonna breaking it down on just how much they changed as far as the gameplay goes, like the timing of the rolls and all kinds of stuff. I mean, he really broke it down. And so I'm like, oh wow, this dude like apparently knows his stuff. And so what it led me to believe is that fans of the series are really particular right and all on how the game plays, which is a big deal, right? Because I mean, these games are extremely difficult, and so a lot of the fun of it, I would imagine, is that the controls and everything are buttoned down in the way that they like it, the way that From Software seems to develop their games. So according to what I was seeing on that video there, I can only imagine that if Blue Point were to do the game, they may not get all the little details down on where it counts, like in the gameplay controls and all, correctly, that it could potentially ruin the experience, even if the game looks incredible and all. And so maybe that's part of the reason why. I don't know for sure. I'm just completely speculating here, right? But maybe because, I mean, Demon Souls seems to have gotten some pretty good reception overall. But again, I get the feeling like From Software is a very hardcore game developer, and so they're really going to cater to the audience, and that what they want the best possible experience the way that they program their games. And maybe they just didn't trust Blue Point to do Bloodborne like this, knowing how beloved Bloodborne is. You know, because if they do Bloodborne right, I mean, this is you have yourself a big seller, and that might have been part of the reason. Again, I have no idea, but it's just interesting, right? That that it's actually come from Software, that they haven't been wanting to do that. So thought I'd add a little tidbit there, as it was just a story that came out recently. But some other things too, also wanted to touch base real quick on is, so this actually has to do with like TV shows and movies, and so they released a new trailer for the Mortal Kombat 2 a few days ago. And so this is coming out in theaters on May 8th of 2026. And I gotta say, it doesn't look half bad. It doesn't look too half bad. So we will see how that all turns out. I'll probably just end up watching it when it comes out to rent or, on streaming. But it's pretty cool though. I mean, it looks interesting. For me, the first Mortal Kombat movie back in the day with what was his name? Robin Cho, and I think that's his name, and Lindsay something, I believe, is the actress that played Johnny Cage, and Bridget. I'm kind of forgetting their names already. But the lady that played Sonya, those to me will always be my classic characters. And then the late actor that played Shang Tsung, unfortunately he's passed, but he was amazing too also, so that'll always be my favorite one. But we'll see. I don't know. I didn't like the first Mortal Kombat movie that came out a few years ago. That one, I don't know. It just felt very soulless like, and that's no pun intended, but it didn't really stick with me. But this one though seems interesting. I have my eye on it, so we'll see how this one turns out. But the other thing though that was causing a lot of stir online was they released a photo, like basically like what the game or the show is going to look like a concept, right? Or I mean, with the actual actors though, of God of War. And so it has Ryan Hurst all painted up as Kratos and the actor Callum Vincent as Atreus. And it basically, if you haven't seen it, it's just like when they do like a photo, right, that they release, like a first look, I guess, right, at a TV or a movie and all. And it's funny because, there's a lot of noise on the internet, right, obviously. And when something comes out, it just like, it's either like completely love it or completely hate it. And it always usually tends to be more completely hate it when these first looks come out. And I mean, I'm looking at it and I mean, it's, it's live action, right? So, and you can only do so much with live action. And that is my concern right there, that because people are really wanting to have things look like the way they do in the video games and all that, we're going to start going to AI, because obviously you can program things a certain way like that in AI, but I don't know. But anyways, it shows, so Ryan Hurst, he's just kind of like leaning over behind his son Atreus, as Atreus, the actor, right? He's like pulling back on a bow and arrow, and it looks like they're looking at something like they're shooting something. And that shot right there has everyone all fired up that it looks horrendous. And when I first saw it, I'm like, well, okay, not bad, right? And but I mean, it kind of does look a little bit like cosplay, but it's not horrible. For me personally, I'm going to just, again, right, let's see it in context, with the actual show. Because there's been several times, too, also, where they show a first look and it looks horrible. But then when you actually see it, right, in motion and all, then it actually looks pretty good. So I'll give it the benefit of the doubt on that, right? And I'll wait to see how it ultimately ends up looking. But yeah, it does look a little weak, right? But not too much for me personally. I personally feel that it is a bit blown out of proportion, right, and a lot of the hate that it's been getting. But I can kind of understand it too, also to an extent. So like, I'm kind of in the middle ground on this one, right? Because while at the same time I said that some things end up being a lot better than what they look, there has been times too also, right, where it's like, oh no, that's the way it looks and it's pretty bad. So we'll see, right? But I mean, they got the right actor I still feel like the actor that they got for Kratos is good. I don't know anything about this Kalen Vincent kid, and all, but usually kid actors, for the most part, they don't disappoint. And I definitely try to give a lot more leniency, or have a lot more grace, right, for kid actors, because I mean they're trying, and we'll see. Like I said, I'm excited about this show to an extent. So, and I guess maybe that's the case. Is like, well, I do love the God of War games. I think they're great. I'm not. The thought of a TV show already. It just doesn't have my biggest interest. Some things I just believe just need to stick to their mediums. But if it comes out with decent reviews, sure, I'll watch it. But maybe that's why I'm not like hugely critical on it, because I'm not hugely interested in it. So I guess that's my thought on it. But let's get now into the year of 2009. So 2009 was a pretty good year overall. And so wanted to start talking about it here. And for me, 2009, it was kind of like 2007, only for me personally, better. But let's start off here with stats and facts and all what happened in this year. So 2009 saw many new releases new installments in established video game franchises such as Assassin's Creed 2, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Uncharted 2, Among Thieves. So just with those three right there, right? Again, they're like games, they're sequels, right, from games that came out in 2007. Wii Sports Resort, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, Resident Evil 5, Left 4 Dead 2, Forza Motorsport 3, The Beatles Rock Band, The Sims 3, Madden NFL 10, NBA 2K10, and FIFA 10. New intellectual properties included Batman Arkham Asylum, Bayonetta, Borderlands, Demon's Souls, Dragon Age Origins, Infamous, Just Dance, Minecraft, Plants vs. Zombies, and Prototype. So for hardware releases, so we had a few things that came out this year. And let's see, so this year just saw revisions models of current game consoles, such as the PlayStation 3 Slim, the PSP Go, the worldwide release of the Nintendo DSi, which initially in Japan the previous year, and the Nintendo DSi XL, named the DSi LL in Japan. So the Nintendo DSi came out on April 2nd in Australia. April 3rd, it came out in Europe. And then in April 5th, it came out here in North America. And on September 1st, the PlayStation 3 Slim came out in North America and Europe, which, yeah, I really enjoyed that. I really like the look of that console, and I still have it to this day. That's one of the older consoles that I still have, that one there. I got a funny little story, actually, on that one here that I'll go over here in a bit. And then October 1st, the PSP Go in North America and Europe. October 31st, the PSP Go in Japan. And November 21st, the DSi XL. So just really quick, the DSi from what I understand, I think it had a few new features on it and all. And then there's the XL version, which is just like a bigger Nintendo DS version of it. The PSP Go, it's an interesting little device so back then, the flip phone, or I'm sorry, like phones back then, some of them would have like a slider where you move up the screen and then it'll reveal like a keyboard, and for like makes it for easier texting and all. I remember I had a phone like that at one point. But the PSP kind of takes that, only instead of obviously having a keyboard, it has like the controls, right? So the directional pad, the analog stick, and the buttons. So it's an interesting little device, and it was all digital. So this is where we're starting to get into digital systems, right? Where you couldn't put a UMD in it, and so anything that you would play on it would be just because something that you bought digitally, right, on the PlayStation storefront. So we're starting to see shades of that now. But the PSP, the PlayStation 3 Slim. So go over a little story on this here. So. So I had, when I first got the PlayStation 3, I've mentioned it before, right? I got the what's considered like the PS3 fat version, and I didn't get it right at launch. I got it roughly around, let's see, it was like in the springtime, I think, somewhere of 2007. Now, my understanding is that, so the PlayStation 3 flat or fat one that came out first, it was backwards compatible with the original PlayStation games. And it was backwards compatible, I think, up to a certain point for PlayStation 2 games. I don't know this for sure, if anybody happens to be listening and, let me know, correct me if I'm wrong. But I want to say that I think originally, the original one, it was like it had a PlayStation 2 somehow built into the PlayStation 3 where you can play the games more or less natively, where eventually then it relied on emulation or something like that to that effect, right? And there was different models of the PlayStation 3 that could do one or the other. Which is why some of the earlier PlayStation 3 systems are really sought after, right? Because technically, if you get one of those, then you can ultimately get, have the PlayStation 1, 2, and 3 all in one system. But they tended to be a bit faulty, right? Probably not on the level of like the Xbox 360s were, but they still had some issues, right? Like there was a yellow light of death, it was called, where, the PlayStation 3 has like a little light, in the front of the system where next to like where you push the power button, I believe. And if it got like a yellow light, something was wrong with your system. I believe that there's ways to mod and fix that now, but, just FYI, if you are wanting to get an old PlayStation 3 console, do some research on it, because there seems to be ways to fix that issue, but otherwise it's a known issue. That is something of like, it's not so much of when or if it'll happen to your system, more of just like when. And with these systems being out in circulation for a while now, and if you buy a used PlayStation 3, there's a good chance, right, that it's going to eventually do this, where it's going to get the yellow light of death unless you mod it, right? So just FYI. But anyways, that's the one that I had, right? I had some kind of an early PlayStation 3 model. I just know that it did play PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games on it. And I had the system for a bit, right? So let's see. So I would have had it in 2007. And let's see, it would have been around, I want to say, I think somewhere in late 2010 or 2011, where I finally upgraded to the PlayStation 3 Slim. And the reason I did that was because the PlayStation 3, I forgot what happened to it, but something happened where the system either wouldn't turn on. I don't know. I might have gotten the yellow light of death. I don't recall, but the disc wasn't ejecting though, and I had Grand Theft Auto 4 in it. And so then for a while, I didn't really think much of it. I was like, maybe one day I'll try to open it up, right, and get my disc out, and but just never really thought too much of it. But then around this time, though, the PlayStation 3 was starting to get a lot of great games, right? Specifically, in 2008 it started, and then this year I feel is like where the PlayStation 3 really got going into high gear. So I wanted to play my PlayStation 3. Now again, this probably I don't think this happened until maybe next year, though, right? But what happened was though that one day I came home kind of wasted. I was out partying and all, and then I think I had picked up a game on the PlayStation 3, and so I was just going to try to play it a little bit and all. But in my drunken stupor, though, I realized that, oh, right, my PlayStation 3 isn't working, and I have Grand Theft Auto 4 stuck inside my PlayStation 3. So my dumbass decided to completely wreck my old PlayStation 3. I remember I ripped it apart. I think I grabbed a hammer, bashed the shit out of it and all. And eventually I was able to get my disc out. Luckily I didn't break the disc, but I completely destroyed my PlayStation 3. And I remember the next morning after that, I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, what the fuck did I do? And so eventually that's what led me to get my PlayStation 3 Slim. And what the reason I'm remembering kind of the date is because I remember transferring over all of my games, well, downloading it from the PlayStation 3 store, right, that I had downloaded, and it was taking forever. And the other day I hooked up my PlayStation 3, and I was just kind of going through like some of my old save files and all, and I just kept noticing that a lot of the dates that when I had downloaded my games was like at the end of 2010 or early 2011. And I was like, oh, that's right, because that's when I was downloading a bunch of stuff onto my PlayStation 3 after I completely destroyed my, original PlayStation. But long story short, if you have a system that is not working, things are faulty. They potentially might be fixed, at least to an extent. Like if you want to just get your disc out, probably don't do what I do and get trash and then trash your system, right? That's not a very smart thing to do. So yeah, little story there on that. But I do love the PlayStation 3. It's the slim one. It's still going to this day. It's and I like it because there's been several games on the PlayStation 3 that you can't really get elsewhere. And I mean, well, there was Metal Gear Solid 4, but now that one's it's getting its version released now, and there's a few other ones, so that's why I've been keeping it around. But yeah, great. I really like this model of the PlayStation 3. All right, but anyways, let's go on to some of the best-selling games here in the United States. Let's see. Well, actually, let's go for Game of the Year, actually. Let's stop here. Excuse me. So for Game of the Year, pretty much, I think most of the places that I was seeing for Game of the Year was Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. I remember that game kind of getting like the really big awards and all as far as like critical acclaim and all that. And let's see, if I'm looking at like the games that got the highest ratings for like critically acclaimed titles. So according to Metacritic and game rankings, it got a 96.43. And another game too also that was pretty high praise this year was Batman Arkham Asylum. But we'll get more into those here in a bit. Let's see. So, all right. So this one's a little weird where usually I've just been going over the sales figures for here in North America, but this one apparently only has best-selling games, but just worldwide. So I guess I'll just go over this here. But coming in at number one was Wii Sports so it has here, let's see, sales. So I would assume this is units sold. Doesn't really say, so I'm going to assume it's units sold. But it just says 20,180,000. For Wii Sports Resorts, it was 13,580,000. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, 11,860,000. For New Super Mario Bros. Wii, 10,555,000. Wii Fit Plus, 10,160,000. Wii Fit, 8,590,000. Mario Kart Wii, 7,550,000. Assassin's Creed 2 was 6 million. Wii Play was 5,800,000. And Resident Evil 5,200,000. And so again, I don't know if that's money or units sold. Doesn't really say, but well, yeah. Let's see. So now let's go over to like events that happened in this year. So on January 29th to the 31st, Ensemble Studios, the creator of Age of Empires series, was shut down after 15 years of service. Wow. Crytek, the developers of Far Cry and Crysis, buys Free Radical Designs, the developers of the Time Splitters series, and renames it to Crytek UK. February 4th to the 6th, Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment acquires Snowblind Studios, the developers of Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. On March 10th, the 5th British Academy Video Game Awards, honoring video game achievements, released in late 2007 and 2008. March 23rd to the 27th, Game Developers Conference 2009 was held in San Francisco. April 22nd to the 24th, Square Enix fully acquires Eidos Interactive, the publishers of the Tomb Raider and Hitman series. So I thought that was always kind of interesting, where, a company that was very predominant in JRPGs and such would buy these kind of more Western Western developers. And well, that comes into play much later, right? Kind of in the times that we're in now. But yeah, that was an interesting decision, I guess I would say at that point. June 2nd to June 4th, E3 of 2009 in Los Angeles, which showcased many new games as well as new motion controllers for both the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Sony's new iteration of its PlayStation Portable handheld was also revealed. The PlayStation Portable Go is the first handheld console to forego the use of any physical media, opting instead to use digital download only. So yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, that was kind of the start of things to come. June 24th, ZeniMax Media, the owner of Bethesda Softworks, fully acquires ID Software, the developers of Doom, Wolfenstein, and Quake. July 3rd to the 5th, Screw Attack Gaming Convention at the West End DFW in Dallas, Fort Texas is held. In August 13th to the 16th, QuakeCon 2009 at the Hilton Anatoly in Dallas, Texas is held. August 17th to the 21st, in Sweden, Joachim Bennett announces that the video game magazine Superplay will be discontinued in the near future. August 17th to the 19th, the Gamers Developers Conference in Europe of 2009 is held at Cologne Trade Fair in Cologne, Germany. August 19th to the 23rd, Gamescom 2009 is held at the Cologne Trade Fair in Cologne, Germany, where Sony unveiled the new version of its PlayStation 3 console, the 120 gigabyte PS3 Slim, which rebranded the PlayStation 3 using a new logo as well as a new exterior. And yeah, and that was the cool thing about it. I mean, it's like a new logo. It was kind of like a new rebranding. And I think it was around this time, I'm not quite sure if they'll talk about it here later, but we got the actor Ken Butler, I believe, that he started coming out with some commercials for Sony, and they're pretty funny. If you get a chance, if you've never seen him before, if you weren't around this time and you have any interest in it, Google them. I would say like Ken Butler or Kevin Butler, and they're just kind of funny. And he was sort of like their mascot almost, as far as for like their marketing anyways. And so he helped, he was like a comedian of some sort. And let's see, I'm trying to look him up actually right now. What was his name? Kevin Butler. Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so, oh my God. So Kevin Butler is a fictional PlayStation executive portrayed by actor Jerry Lambert. Okay. Who starred in popular Sony commercials from 2009 to 2011 to promote the PlayStation 3. Known for his humorous VP of Everything roles, he addressed customer complaints and highlighted the console's features, becoming a beloved marketing icon before his abrupt departure after Lambert appeared in a competitor's ad. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah. But anyways, for that little stretch there, no, his commercials are funny. So yeah, we'll just Google or YouTube Kevin Butler PlayStation commercials, and yeah, you'll get a kick out of those if you don't, if you weren't around from that time. Let's see. But next up here, though, so October 21st to the 22nd, BlizzCon 2009 was held at Anaheim Convention Center in Anaheim, California, United States, whose tickets were sold out online within minutes of being released. And August 27th to the 31st, so Batman Arkham Asylum attains a Guinness World Record for the most critically acclaimed superhero game ever. We will talk more about that game, but yeah, well deserved. I mean, at the time, I believe I've said it before on this podcast at some point. I'm a big fan of Batman, DC Comics, and all. So this game was like a nerd's dream come true. Absolutely loved it, and yeah, we'll get more into that here later. But September 1st to the 3rd, the launch of the new 120 gigabyte Sony PS3 Slim with a cheaper price, which has been positively received by critics and gamers alike, garnering positive reviews and high sales worldwide. So this is where Sony kind of started picking up, again, some steam, right? And all after it had been, I want to say completely dominated by the Xbox 360, but the 360 was just the preferred system up to this point. But this is where things kind of started shifting, right? So September 4th through 7th, PAX 2009 at the Washington State Convention and Trade Center in Seattle, Washington was held. September 9th through the 13th, Apple launched the iPod Touch 3G. I remember having an iPod Touch. It was, it was innovative at the time, right? I mean, it was kind of what started like the casual gaming and all. I remember actually around this time, let's see, with the 2009. Yeah, 2009, and then in 2010, at the time I worked for a Apple call center for tech support, and so kind of got into the whole Apple thing. And so I remember buying an iPod Nano and then an iPod Touch eventually. And the Touch was pretty cool because it was sort of like a tablet, only smaller, I guess, right? And I mean, you can still play music on it and all, but it also, I remember going on the digital storefront and I was like, oh, wow, there's actually like a whole new world of video games here. And I remember I downloaded a bunch of them that would seem interesting, but really the only one that really caught my interest was this one called Infinity Blade, which is still pretty cool. It's a cool concept where it's kind of like a touchscreen, right? And all, but you have like it's running, I think, like on the Unreal Engine 3, I believe, and you use like your fingers to swipe up, down, left, right, and all to do like sword slashes, which is actually pretty cool. But anyways, the whole concept of the iPod Touch was pretty cool. Although I do have a little bit of PTSD from those there, just because of the tech support I would do on them, and I eventually ended up learning that I am not someone that has the patience to do tech support. So for people that do that, are in that field, I salute you. You have an amazing sense of patience if you actually somewhat enjoy your job. But no, seriously, I mean, it takes a lot of patience to do something like that. But yeah, iPod Touch. September 17th to the 20th, GCA Games Convention Asia 2009 is held at the Suntec Singapore International Convention and Exhibit Center in Singapore. September 24th to the 27th, Tokyo Game Show 2009 is to be held at the Makuhara Misi in Chiba, Japan, one of the best video game conventions alongside E3 and Gamescom. Yeah, I remember the Tokyo Game Show, even to this day, but it's still pretty popular. But October 1st through the 4th, the launch of the new Sony PSP Go, which was met with mixed reviews due to its high price in comparison to its predecessor, the PSP 3000. Excuse me. October 23rd to the 25th, Infinite Bits 2009 at the DoubleTree Miami Mart Hotel and Convention Center in Miami is held. October 30th to the November 1st, International Digital Entertainment Festival 2009 is held at the Royal Exhibition Building in Carlton, in Melbourne, Australia. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. November 14th to the 16th, so it's a game on. London at Earl's Court. Exhibitors include Capcom, Electronic Arts, Nintendo, and Sony Computer Entertainment. December 12th, the 2009 Spike Video Game Awards are held, so those are still going strong. And then it just says here, unknown esports organization Team Sold Mid is launched sometime in 2009, apparently. So notable deaths that happened this year. Let's see. So on June 3rd, so David Carradine, 70, he was 72, actor who played Clockwork and Danny Phantom, The Ultimate Enemy, and William Sharp in Saints Row passed. On June 25th, Michael Jackson, 50 years old, musician who, in addition to various cameos, was the subject of 1990's Moonwalker, the composer, okay, so they're officially saying it here anyways, of Sonic 3's soundtrack, and the namesake of the Just Dance spin-off, The Experience. So he passed on, in 2009, in June 25th. August 2nd, Deng Sanshan, a teenager in China who was reportedly beaten to death in an extra-legal addiction boot camp designed to treat video games and internet addiction. Oh my gosh. That's horrible. Wow. And then October 14th, Lou Albano, 76, pro wrestler and actor who played Mario in the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. So it looks like he passed in also. Alrighty, yeah. So that was 2009. A lot of events that happened this year, apparently. So let's start getting into the actual games themselves. And I do actually have two games here for the portable systems. Again, there's a lot of stuff coming out for the DS and the PSP. Again, forgive me if I'm missing a lot of the stuff. I feel like the episode would just get a little too long if I'm trying to cover all those games as well, too. But two games here that kind of stood out to me here. So on the Nintendo DS, we had a Legend of Zelda Spirit Tracks. And I don't know if this one came before Phantom Hourglass, but we got this game here. And so the game, what I do know about it is that it has a very cartoony look, kind of like basically taken off of the same style that the Wind Waker had. Only in this one here, in Spirit Tracks, you're riding some kind of a train of some sort. And was it this one or Phantom Hourglass that I played a bit? And I mean, it's interesting the way you use the stylus and all. I wouldn't say it's completely revolutionary, but it was a fun novelty, right? And I mean, I would definitely be curious to really go through these games here and see what they're all about. They're probably the Legend of Zelda games that kind of some of the more least interested ones overall, and trying to be, but they do seem interesting though, right? So not to knock on them completely, and yeah, it came out this year though on the Nintendo DS. And then for the PSP, so we got Castlevania, the Dracula X Chronicles. And for me personally, this game, it's all right. Like this version, right? I'm not the biggest fan of it, but the reason I included it in here was because I thought it was interesting on how we were starting to finally get some games that had been exclusive to another region, right? And over here to the United States, because as far as I know, I believe that this is the first time that we got this game here, which is what it is. It's basically a remake of Castlevania Rondo of Blood. And so some episodes back, right? I think probably going back to 1993 maybe, or 94. We talked about that game, Castlevania Rondo of Blood. And so that game was originally on the PC Engine CD. Oops. And sorry, dropped my microphone. But yeah, it was on the PC Engine CD and was exclusive to that territory for a while. And so it was sort of like a kind of like that rare game, right? And all that was supposedly really good, but because back then there wasn't really ways of playing imported games that easily unless you were gonna buy the imported system and all, and so basically this game eluded a lot of American gamers for the longest time, and so finally we got a version of this game. Now the remake itself, I don't hate it, but I don't necessarily like it too much. I much prefer the original version. But the cool thing about this one, though, is that if it's kind of hidden in the game, but you can unlock the Castlevania Rondo of Blood game, the original one, along with Symphony of the Night as well, too. So I thought that was pretty cool right there. And so it just kind of, it was just pretty cool, right? And all to play like this, sort of like this hidden gem of a game, right? And all that was exclusive to another territory and finally be able to play it over here. That was always cool when that happened, right? There was like a handful of Final Fantasy games that was like that. Castlevania also, Rondo of Blood. And so it was just pretty cool. All right, but let's get into the main systems now. And so there was a lot of multi-plat games that came out this year, right, that I feel were worthwhile talking. And this is where I mean, we were getting to the point where exclusives were still there for sure, right? Obviously, Nintendo still had their exclusives, and also Sony too. But Xbox, it had some exclusives this year, at least that were exclusive at this time. But a lot of the games that I'm going to mention here, a lot of these I actually had on the Xbox 360, but you can play them on the PlayStation 3 too as well. And so let's just go over some of these here because there's quite a bit here. Excuse me. But starting with Plants vs. Zombies. And so this is a indie game of some sort. It's I've played a little bit of it where you're like these plants and you're it's almost like a strategy game where you're lining up your plants and they're shooting out like these seeds at these incoming zombies, and it's all like done like in this really cutesy kind of animation and art style. And for little bit that I played of it, it seems pretty fun. It seems just kind of more of that sort of mobile gaming kind of style distraction. And so this is where, again, a lot of these games were starting to become really popular, because that's a whole nother universe of games, right? And all that I'm just not going to get into, because it's just, I'm not too familiar with them and all, and it's just not just generally the kind of games that I like to play. But just know that, yeah, I mean, that was a whole new market that was out there, for mobile gaming, and this was one of the more popular games that came out during that time. But we also got Guitar Heroes Metallica. So Guitar Heroes game, only with a lot of Metallica music, which is, pretty cool. Metallica always has amazing music, and never played this one though. But yeah, I mean, cool concept though, right? But then the Rock Band had their version though. So it was with having a popular group, and that was for the Beatles. And so I just vaguely remember this version being pretty popular, but it was one of the Rock Band ones I remember playing at a friend's house quite a bit. But I think it was just like either Rock Band 1 or 2 or one of those there. I forget. But yeah, I mean, these games were just cranking them out, So back then it was like what would seem almost like DLC were just being done as like, brand new releases, right? But another multi-platform game that came out, which to me, even to this day, has some incredible graphics, and that's a Fight Night Round 4. So I don't know if I talked about the first Fight Night game, because it came out like close to launch on the Xbox 360. But this is basically like another game in the series where it's like an actual boxing game, right? That features like real life boxers and all. So it's kind of a sports simulator, right? Like a simulation boxing game, I should say. And it tries to strive for realism. The character models look incredible. Like I remember seeing like when you knock out one of the other fighters and all, it looks really like realistic. The skin texture, the sweat and all. I remember I was just like stunned by like the look of this game. And this one's pretty fun too. And also, you can pick a lot of like legacy boxers or even boxers that were relevant at the time. And then also has like a cool story mode to it as well. So I would say if you have any interest in boxing, when it comes to the sport of boxing, the sweet science, this is for me my favorite boxing game. If I'm talking just video games in general, right, I'm probably going to go for Super Punch-Out, right? As a boxing game that's a video game. But if it's a simulation and all, this is definitely my favorite one. It's the gameplay is really well done. It's definitely strives for realism, and it's really fun though. Has a cool story mode, and yeah, a lot of content to it. Just an excellent game. I know I'm pretty sure I can play this backwards compatible on my Series X. I just don't know if it's available still somehow to buy, and because I would imagine re-releasing these games as usual. Any game that has a license to it, it's just going to be difficult to re-release. But if you can get your hands on it somehow, and if you're into boxing, highly recommend this game. I'm actually curious because there was a game I think it's called The Contender, I believe. They came out recently on the PlayStation, because it was on the PlayStation storefront. Contender, is that what it's called? Contender, no, not Contender. Undisputed. Sorry, I had to look it up. So yeah, supposedly this is kind of like a more realistic style boxing game. Seems to be. I think it's gotten pretty decent reviews. I'd be curious to see this. I used to be really into boxing a lot of some years back. I used to watch it a lot with friends and all. And I still enjoyed the sport. I just haven't really watched it too much more recently, and especially because a lot of the mainline fights that they do are just kind of a joke now, I feel. But yeah, I'd be curious to check out this Undisputed game though. But on that note, though, since I did say contenders, if you want to see like a cool reality show, boxing show, there was a show that Sylvester Stallone and Sugar Ray Leonard produced some years ago. This would have been like in the mid 2000s, I believe, and it was called The Contender. And at least I would say that at least the first 2 seasons are really good. I really got into those there, and yeah, they're pretty cool. So I believe that you can find them on YouTube. So again, The Contender seasons 1 and 2. It had some other seasons, but as far as I know, they weren't quite as popular as the first 2 seasons. It's mainly the first one. Some of these boxers ended up actually playing, fighting like more professional boxers and all. And well, most of them didn't go too far as actually in their actual professional career. The fact that they were able to compete there still and all, right, to some extent was still pretty cool. But yeah, I used to love watching the sport a lot back in the day. I would say from like the mid 2000s to about 2012 or 13 or so. I remember being into the sport quite a bit. We just had a group of friends and all that. We would watch a lot of boxing matches and all. And even at one point we were doing like backyard boxing and all, and just, knock someone out or get knocked out and all. And, we were all wasted. Those fun times. But anyways, yeah, Fight Night Round 4, really fun game. If you've never checked it out, would highly recommend it. But another game that came out too, and so we're getting to the point now where, so, having just talked about Castlevania, the Dracula X Chronicles, that was a remake of Castlevania Rondo of Blood, we also got Bionic Commando. And Bionic Commando, this one here, it's basically a remake of the original Nintendo version that I talked about way back in episode probably, 1986 or 87 or so, I think is when I talked about that game. And so yeah, it's a complete remake where it's a 2.5D game now. I mean, it's more or less the same game, just with polygonal graphics now. And it's really cool. I really enjoyed this version here. And it was done by Grim Entertainment or something like that. So Capcom was trying to bring back Bionic Commando, which is good, right? Because Bionic Commando was a great game. And so they started it off with this game here. And this game here, I have some fondness for it because it was the first indie game or indie-like game that I purchased over online. And for some reason I had some kind of a stigma about buying a game that was an indie game, on digital, because I was very much into buying like physical copies. But I bought this game and I was like, oh, actually this could be pretty cool, right? Because they're cheaper and it was a fun experience. And so I just thought it was kind of cool how they were still trying to keep retro-like games alive this way. Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy this version. It's really well done. I would say if you like Bionic Commando, the original NES game, definitely check it out. Or if you've never played that game, but you have an interest in it, this is a good version to play. You can get it now like on Steam and all, right? But at the time, you could also buy it on the PlayStation Network and on the Xbox 360, Xbox Live Arcade as well, too. So good stuff there. Let's see. And so then we also got Ghostbusters, the video game. And so this is a really great game. If you're a fan of Ghostbusters, like the movies, which I am, very fun and entertaining. It definitely feels like a sequel, right, to the movies. And you get most of the voice actors that come back. I think, like, I could be wrong, but I think Dan Aykroyd. Okay, I know Dan Aykroyd. I'm pretty sure he does the voice for Ray. And Bill Murray, I don't know if it's actually Bill Murray that plays Peter in it, but you play a rookie, right, joining the team. And yeah, I mean, it has the look of the actual, the actors from back in the day. It has the music, has the vibe of the movies and all. So yeah, definitely worth playing if you're a fan of of this franchise. There was Prototype also, and I don't know much about this game other than I know it was some kind of a superhero game, and where it was like an original superhero, right? So not based on like DC or Marvel, but you get it's kind of like open world and all, and that's about as much as I know about it. I just know that this and another game that I'll talk about later were sort of like going head to head as far as like the more popular superhero game that was not based on a DC or Marvel property. But this is where we got the first Borderlands game as well, too. So this is a series that has eluded me for many years, that I've had some interest in playing it, though. I've actually had a lot of friends that have recommended this series to me. And so what I know about it is, so it's a first-person looter shooter, I think is what they're called. And it's kind of like a first-person shooter, but it has some adventure RPG elements to it, where you gather a lot of items and all, and you can customize weapons, I believe, and your character, I believe, maybe to an extent. But it's done in these cool cel-shaded graphics, and so it has a very almost cartoony comic book look to it. And so I really like that style and all. And I've played a bit of the first one, and I was like, okay, this is cool. But again, just a series that I just haven't really fully committed to playing. But I do plan to at some point, as they do look like a lot of fun. I mean, the series became really popular. It's spawned a lot of sequels that have been really popular. And then also it even had a movie that came out, and even like there was a game that was done in like a episodic story-driven game that was done from it. I'm sure we'll touch base on that one sometime later. That there, I believe, was pretty well done as well, too. The movie, though, from my understanding, was just completely horrendous. So, but, the fact that it got a movie greenlit, right, and all goes to show just how popular the IP, became. But another multi-platform game was Bayonetta. And so this is done by Platinum Games, and I believe published by Sega. And so this game here, it's a really cool action game, kind of in the vein of like, kind of like Devil May Cry to an extent. Only you play as Bayonetta, who she's sort of like this. She has like these witch powers and all. Super sassy. She's definitely her sense of humor and all, and just of her and the game overall is very tongue in cheek, and it's kind of hilarious. And but the action is pretty kick ass though in it. She definitely makes for a really cool protagonist, and you get a lot of wild, crazy special moves and all. And it runs at 60 frames per second, which again during this generation wasn't the norm. And so this is one of the we talked about, I believe, last episode, right, about Japanese games not being, the more popular ones during this stretch. There was a handful of them, though, right, that were pretty good, and this is one of them here. Bayonetta is a really kick-ass action game, and so if you like Devil May Cry, what we couldn't get in Devil May Cry 4, I feel like we got that kind of action in Bayonetta. It's a really fun game, and just the characters and all. And yeah, it is published by Sega because there's a few stages that I think take homage to like certain Sega properties. Like I want to say Outrun and Afterburner. Yeah, overall, really fun game. And yeah, you'll enjoy this one if you like any kind of like action games. But one thing I will say also about Bayonetta is that this is one example, though, where the Xbox 360 version really shined through, as the PlayStation 3 version, from what I recall, was pretty broken. And so the Xbox 360 was a version to play on this, as it was just a smoother playing version. I believe it didn't have as long loading times or something like that. I just recall that just everywhere I was seeing in the reviews, everyone was just pretty much saying like, yeah, get the 360 version because that's going to be the better one. And that's the one that I played back then. So I can't really, I don't have any firsthand experience with the PlayStation 3 version. So I would say, I mean, nowadays you can buy like remastered versions of this game, right? So I guess if you buy that one, it doesn't really matter anymore. But if for some reason you wanted to go with the original version, I would go with the Xbox 360 one. But another game also was Dragon Age Origins. This game I'd really like to go through at some point, all the way through. Another game that I started, I got quite a ways into it, but just never actually beat it. But so this game is from BioWare, and so it plays it has a lot of similarities to like Knights of the Old Republic, which I loved, right? Only now this is in a dark sort of fantasy medieval setting. And yeah, I mean, it's take everything about like Star Wars, the Knights of the Old Republic, and just put that in this kind of setting, and you get this game here. And so what's cool about it is so when you first start off, you select like your class and your race, and then that'll determine how the first segment of the game will open up as and so I thought that was pretty cool there, because I think there's like 3 different openings that you can get, or maybe more, I forgot. But I thought that was pretty cool though. And then eventually the game kind of plays out the way it would normally play out. But I don't know, I felt that was pretty cool. Kind of gave your where you can customize your character, but kind of felt like it had its own story too also, right? Where sometimes when you get games where you customize your character, they're just sort of like a blank slate. This at least felt like it gave it some kind of background and character, and all. I thought that was pretty cool. A cool game overall, cool combat system. Like I said, it has a lot of similarities to Knights of the Old Republic, only obviously instead of the force powers, you're using things like magic spells and whatnot. But the characters are really well done. They're they're good acting all the way around. And yeah, cool game. I really want to get into this game more. I forgot a lot about the story, but it's a pretty cool game, and it spawned several sequels. But from what I've played and from what I've kind of heard and all, this one seems to be the more revered one though. But we also got Assassin's Creed 2. And so I will say it right now. We're going to talk about a lot of Assassin's Creed games going forward, but this is my favorite one. And I got into part 1. I've talked about that before. I did go through that game and beat it. And then this one here, I really felt that they improved on so much of this game that it ended up being one of my more favorite games of this year. And I think it was just a combination of the RPG mechanics that was thrown into it. I thought were really well done. The setting of being in Renaissance Italy, I thought was highly unique and really engaging. The open world map and all, I thought was really well done. Ezio is just an excellent character. Altair, he was he was cool, I guess. I love his look, right? But the character himself, he was a little bland. But Ezio has a lot of personality, and his overall story arc and all is really cool. And and the story itself, right, I thought was really well done. Great music as well too. And yeah, there's my favorite Assassin's Creed game. I really like this. And having said that, I've only really played 1 and 2. I've gotten a ways into some of the other ones, but they eventually just kind of lost my interest. And so that's why I don't know. I just feel like maybe this one just really holds a special place for me as far as Assassin's Creed games go. But yeah, excellent game though. I mean, you can get this game remastered now and all, and so those would be the versions to get. But the original versions, the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, from what I recall, they ran mostly the same. And so again, we're getting to the point now where a lot of multi-platform games are starting to be pretty much the same on both platforms, outside of course, obviously Bayonetta. But yeah, I mean, in general, for the most part, it seemed like Xbox 360 games would run slightly smoother, but it was small differences, right? And also, because I remember this game, my brother bought Assassin's Creed 2 on the PlayStation 3, and so that's the version that we played, and we had a fun time with it. I don't recall like any major bugs in the game or glitches and all, as far as I can recall. But yeah, excellent game. I really enjoyed this game, and I if there's an Assassin's Creed game that I would love to go back to, it'd be this one here. I just remember I had a really fun time with it. I thought the ending to it was really excellent as well too, and it was fun trying to uncover all the secrets, where at this time we hadn't quite got burned out on these kind of games. And I just had a really fun time with this one here. And from what I understand, it seems to be one of the more revered games in this series here. And I really liked it. I always liked how after you do an assassination, Ezio would go, what's he say? He says it in Italian, but it's like respete in pace or something like that. How do you say that? Okay, let's see. According to Skynet here, riposa in pace. Is that how you say it? Resquiet and passe. I don't know. It looks like there's a few different ways of saying, but anyways, however he says it in the game, I just thought always that was kind of cool. But yeah, Assassin's Creed 2, really great game. And yeah, Ezio, one of my more favorite protagonists from this generation here. But another multi-platform game, and this one was a bit of a shock, right? When it was multi-platform, but it's Tekken 6. So up to this point, Tekken series had been exclusive to the PlayStation, but here we get Tekken 6 on the Xbox 360 also. And so that was interesting because, again, right, this is kind of goes to show just how popular, the 360 was getting, right? Where it was some of these games were starting to come out on the Xbox 360. So like, for example, we had Grand Theft Auto 4 last year, and now we get Tekken. Tekken was not that it was bigger than Grand Theft Auto 4, but Grand Theft Auto 4, for some reason, it kind of felt like it could go multi-platform, right? At least for me. But with this one here, Tekken, I was like, that's like a Sony, game, right? I don't know what's it doing over here on the 360, but I thought that was pretty cool, right? And if anything, one cool thing one thing that I will give props to the Xbox on is its backwards compatibility. So what I mean by that is there's a few games that I was wanting to still have from this generation that I was maybe more used to playing on the PlayStation, but again, unless you have the PlayStation system and the original game, you don't really have a way of playing it. So Tekken 6, for example, Tekken 6 is not available on the Sony PlayStation, like the 4 or 5. I mean, you have Tekken 6 that you can get if you have like the PS subscription, but that's the PSP version. So the actual 7th generation version, you can't play on the PlayStation 4 or 5 as far as I'm aware of, but it is backwards compatible on the Xbox 360. And so I have like that version there. And there's some other games too also, the kind of the same thing, right? Where you can't get the PlayStation 3 version on a PlayStation system, but because they came out on the 360, you can play a version there, right? So that's, one thing that I will give kudos to for Microsoft, right, as their backwards compatibility, because otherwise some of these games would be lost in time. But Tekken 6, though, excuse me. I'm over here crunching on ice. Sorry about that. But Tekken 6, I mean, I really liked the series up to this point. Tekken 3 is my favorite. Tekken 5 was like my close second favorite. But this one here, I don't know, Tekken 6, this is where I kind of started losing interest in Tekken. Because Tekken 6, I mean, it's not bad. It controls well, and there's even some new mechanics to it and all, but something about Tekken 6 that just didn't really strike me that much, though. And again, I first played it on the PlayStation 3 back then, but then more recently, when I tried it again on the 360, I'm like, yeah, something about this one that just doesn't really hold my interest that much. So I would say it's one of my more least favorite Tekken games, but it is Tekken, and otherwise, like, again, the gameplay is decent enough and all, but yeah, just one of the more forgettable Tekken games, I would say, for me personally, anyways. But a fighting game that wasn't forgettable, and one of my favorite fighting games of all time, actually, is Street Fighter 4. Well, I should say probably a later version that came out of this game here, right? But Street Fighter 4, basically, right? But I thought it was really impressive with what they did with this series here, right? Because for many years, the thought was that you couldn't quite get the tight controls and the responsiveness of a 2D sprite-based Street Fighter game in 3D, because there had been attempts to do Street Fighter in 3D. There was like the Street Fighter EX series, I believe it was called. And you know what? Those weren't half bad. Those were not bad games. It just wasn't quite Street Fighter, though. But Street Fighter 4, the goal was basically to try to get the responsiveness and the tight controls and all of like the 2D games that had come out before it, right? Only now with 3D character models. And I gotta say, they pretty much nailed it for the most part. And that's one thing that immediately stood out when I played this game at first. I was like, oh, wow, they got it. They finally nailed it. And I love the character art in this game and all. The characters look really impressive. And the classic Street Fighter gameplay is here. I really enjoyed the new characters, the stages, the overall, setup of the game. So much about this game I loved. It's actually my... So again, when I say Street Fighter 4, just all of the games in this series, right? Because like, again, there's a bunch of them and all. I mean, ultimately, I would say Ultra Street Fighter 4, but that comes out later. But again, the Street Fighter 4, I would say it's probably, it's my second favorite Street Fighter game. So first one is Street Fighter Alpha 3, right? And then almost right behind that, Street Fighter Alpha 2. But then outside of the Alpha series, I would say Street Fighter 4. Well, again, the variations of Street Fighter 4 is my second favorite game in this series. I feel like they were done really well. I put a lot of hours into this game. I just really enjoyed it back then, and I played it on the PlayStation 3 back then, and yeah, I just had a blast with it. Really enjoyed my time with this game, and yeah, I just love this game here, and yeah, I was just really impressed with the graphics and all. They were able to hit the 60 frames per second. It looks all really nice. Although I played it on the PlayStation 3 and I never had a problem with it. But from what I understand, the Xbox 360 version, I think, plays slightly better. And this is another one also where this particular version, Street Fighter 4 is backwards compatible with the Xbox Series X. It's on the PlayStation. There is the Ultra Street Fighter 4 you can play. But like it's not, but it was a version made exclusively for the PlayStation 4, as far as I understand. But like the PlayStation 3 version, right, and all is not compatible with the PlayStation 4 or 5, I think, right? But again, another point where backwards compatibility kind of comes through. But yeah, just the game overall. So Street Fighter 4 came out in 2008 in the arcades, but it came out in early 2009 for the 360 and the PlayStation 3. And yeah, just a awesome fighting game series. I just remember I put a lot of time into this one. I used to like using the wrestler at Fuerte and of course always Ryu. But I did like experimenting with some of the other characters, and I just love to see their super moves, because that was the cool thing too, is that when you finish the character, or when you finish the fight with a super move, it had like this really dramatic animation, and then also like with the red and yellow screen in the background, and it goes KO. I thought that was always pretty cool. But yeah, definitely one of my more favorite games, honestly, of this year, and that was a fighting game, right? I just thought it was really well done. But Capcom had another hit as well. So again, Japanese games were at a complete loss, right? And Capcom was one of the few that was still doing a pretty good job during the stretch here. But they had Resident Evil 5. Now, Resident Evil 5, as far as the series goes, I mean, it tends to be one of the more least favorite ones in the series, but it's not bad, though. It's just like, I feel like why people, kind of frowned upon this game a bit is because it's very much more action-oriented than horror. And, I mean, it takes the over-the-shoulder camera perspective that Resident Evil 4 did. Only the action is more amplified, and yes, you're still finding like monsters and zombie like creatures and all, or infected people, but it's definitely more action, and but it's still really fun though. But one thing, the game takes place in Africa, and so it's an interesting setting where I believe at the time they were saying that they were trying to market this game as like, where it's scary in broad daylight, because a lot of the game takes place like in this really, like really sunny, harsh, hot looking weather. And I mean, it kind of works to an extent. I will say that the first part of the first stage of the game, where you get all of these, infected people coming at you, I thought that was pretty, horrifying at first, right? Because you're like, oh crap, there's like they're never ending, right? It seems like they just keep coming and coming. So I thought that was a cool setup there, right? Which took some inspiration from from Resident Evil 4. When you're trapped in that village, right, and all where all those ganados are after you, and so they kind of recreated that in a way, right? And I thought it was really well done. But then after that, like I said, right, the game is not, I can't say it's like really scary, but in this one here, you control Chris Redfield and a newcomer, Sheva. And what they try to do in this game is where it try to do like multiplayer, where one character controls one or the other, well, two players I should say controls one or the other. And I think I played it a handful of times like that with my brother. I don't recall, but I can take it or leave that option, right? It's and then if you play it one player, the AI to Sheva, I mean, it works for the most part, but it can be a little annoying at parts too. But overall though, the game is pretty fun and takes some interesting twists to the story, well, the overall Resident Evil story, and that I thought was pretty interesting. But if you go into the game, wanting to play like a cool action game, I think you'll appreciate this game. But if you're going into it wanting like a scary Resident Evil experience, this is where you might be disappointed, right? And all, and I think that was kind of the sentiment back then there. But still, overall, pretty cool game and really nice looking game too. Struggled a bit with its frame rate, but overall pretty good. I played this one on the PlayStation 5. I'm sorry, on the PlayStation 3. As far as I know, I don't think there was like major differences between this one and the Xbox 360. Maybe one ran a little bit better than the other and all, but for the most part, from what I understand, they were both pretty close together though, as far as their performance and all. But either way, pretty cool game though. And this and Street Fighter 4 kind of came out, if I remember right, almost back to back. So it's kind of cool that we got those two Capcom games right back then. But for me, another favorite game of mine during the stretch was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. This is my favorite Call of Duty game. And again, when I say Call of Duty, I'm saying like the single player campaigns. I never really played the multiplayer, but I really thought that the campaign of this one was really well done. I was a huge fan of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and this one to me just really expanded on the overall setting more on it. I feel like the set pieces here were really incredible. I mean, there's two moments in this game that I was like, oh my God, where my jaw was on the floor, right? It's just far as what I was seeing. I mean, we're talking about like big epic moments, right? But done like in a more modern sort of setting. And I just thought that was incredible. There was one scene where, without spoiling anything, but there was one scene where I'll just say you're in Washington, D.C., and things get dark. I'll leave it at that. I thought that whole setup, right, that what led up to that, and then as you're playing through it and all, I just thought it was incredible, right? And it's kind of frightening, right? Because the game is, again, set in a modern setting, right? In a, modern warfare, right? And so, I mean, it almost seems a little scary, right? And all of things that could potentially happen in the real world, right? And so I think that's what gave the game a bit of a grounded feeling to it, and it was cool. I just remember I thought it was like just a really cool scene there. And I mean, the game plays really well. You still got your really snappy controls, right, as you're aiming down your shots and all of that feels really well done still, from like the first Modern Warfare game. And yeah, just a great experience overall. But I'd be remiss of not mentioning the really controversial part of this game, right? Again, if you've never played this game, I don't want to spoil anything, but I will just say this, that I mean, I'm not someone that gets like offended really by like content in games or movies or anything, or I can, feel uncomfortable. But there was one segment in this game that is still probably to this day a scene that still makes me feel a little uncomfortable every time playing it. I remember the lead up to the game, in the news and all, they were already talking about it, and just that it was, in some places they were trying to ban the game, I believe, because of this particular scene. So again, if you were around back then, you know what I'm talking about, right? If you weren't, and if you have no idea what I'm talking about for some reason, then I'll just say, go into it blind. If you feel like you might be a little sensitive to certain subject matter, it does give you the option, I believe, at the start of the game, where it says like if you want to turn a particular scene off, and so you do have that option, right? Or maybe do some research and all if if you feel like you might be sensitive to this. I'll just say that it's no Russian, and leave it at that, right? So if you really want to know what it is, just Google no Russian Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and you'll see what it's all about. But if you feel like you just don't care, that you won't get offended, then just go into it blind, because it is really frightening kind of what happens in this scenario. And I remember I kind of knew what was going to happen already going into it at the time, but actually playing the scene, I was like, oh geez, this is kind of horrifying. And I mean, it was pretty ballsy that they put it in there. And I mean, kind of given, especially with, things that have been happening at that time and even to nowadays, right? And I think that's why some people found the scene a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah. So, but yeah, definitely gave the game a very, like a very gritty feel to it, right? Where, a lot of the things that anything that makes me feel a little uncomfortable or uneasy, and all to an extent, is things that I feel like could happen in real life, right? Like, for example, if I'm watching like something about monsters and all that, doesn't really scare me too much. But if I'm watching things like about like what humans are actually capable of, then that's what's kind of more frightening to me, right? And whether if it's on a more personal, intimate level or on on an international level, right? And yeah, anyway, so without going into further detail on that, I just, like I said, right, and all, it definitely made the game stand out for me. And yeah, like I said, to this day, still my favorite Call of Duty game. Really love the campaign on this, and there was a remake or a remaster version that came out of this with better graphics on it and all, so that's a really nice version to play if you're just going for the single player campaign. What I can say about the multiplayer, without having played it, is that my understanding is that it was one of the best multiplayers in Call of Duty of all time also. So you had the 1-2 punch of that, right? And so it made this game really popular during this time. And yeah, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 really amped up the ante as far as Call of Duty or this style of game went. But for me, my favorite multi-platform game of this year was Batman Arkham Asylum. And this game, so I think I talked about it a few episodes back, where during the stretch right here, so the Christopher Nolan Batman movies were becoming really popular, but that was a very realistic take on The Dark Knight, where, but they were, but the speculation was that there was going to be a video game of Batman of some sort, right, because of the popularity of those movies. Well, there were some rumors back then that there was something being worked that had to do with the Dark Knight series of movies, but ultimately never came to fruition. A few episodes back, I talked about how someone leaked some information out that showed that there was indeed a game that was being developed that was based within the Dark Knight universe, but a combination of that Christopher Nolan didn't really want to sign off on it. But then also because around the same time, Batman Arkham Asylum came out, and that game got really great reviews and all. So I think it was just kind of, seemed pointless to release another Batman game to try to compete with itself, I guess, more or less. Well, that version would have been pretty cool, right, to see what it would have been all about. But I can say that Batman Arkham Asylum is excellent. And this game was just like a dream come true because it's Batman, which I'm a huge fan of. It ran on the Unreal Engine 3, so games that ran on this engine kind of gave them kind of like a gritty look to it and all, and it worked really well with something like Gears of War, and I felt it really worked well with this style of Batman, and because it was comic booky, but also had a certain real life look to it in a way, and I just thought it made for a really good combination of that. You get Kevin Conroy, who is Batman, in my opinion, as far as his voice goes. I mean, you can't find a better Batman voice out there, rest in peace. And he lended his talents to this game here. And so it's just always fun listening to him play Batman. But then you also had Mark Hamill, who is pretty much hands down the best Joker voice of all time, right? Outside of like Heath Ledger, but that was in live action. But when it comes to Joker, live action, definitely Heath Ledger, and even to an extent Jack Nicholson. But when it came to the voiceover work, then Mark Hamill was definitely the GOAT on this. And so to see both of them together right in this game was just a lot of fun. And you also get the actress, I forgot her name, but she was the one that did Harley Quinn in the animated shows. And so same thing in this one. So just hearing the three of them, right, and all definitely brought back a lot of nostalgia, right? But now in a new story, new setting, and all, it was kind of like old meets the new in the best way possible. And the gameplay was really excellent too, because it really revolutionized like beat 'em up controls, as this kind of beat 'em up action that was introduced in this game, where it's like really combo heavy, and the way you can target your enemies for in this really fluid motion was really fun, really addicting, really well made and polished, and definitely made you feel like a badass, right? Oh, as you're fighting on, a whole group of bad guys. And it was just where a lot of beat 'em up games before this were a bit clunky and they didn't quite work that well for the most part. This one really gave it an identity right to these kind of games here. And again, because a lot of other games going forward, copied this formula here because it was just that well done. And the way you use Batman's tool sets and his detective skills also too, it just really made you feel like Batman. And so, and the story to it was written by Paul Dini, or I think that's his last name, who he did a lot of like the the Batman animated cartoons back in the day, back in the 90s. And so you get interact with a lot of the Batman's rogues gallery, because basically the game takes place where you're in Arkham Asylum, right, for one night. And so I like the concept of that setting, right, because being in Arkham Asylum, it really lets you sort of get into the nitty gritty, right, with a lot of his rogues galaxy and characters. And the story overall is pretty good. And and how it lets you meet these characters. And even if you don't actually see one of the Batman characters in it, there's a lot of Easter eggs in this game where it just, does a really good job of not just being there for, just for like an Easter egg, right? But also the way it just fleshes out the overall Arkham Asylum universe, right? Because it really, it's Batman, obviously, is an established franchise, but it does a really good job of fleshing out this version of Batman. And I thought it did it really well here. And yeah, and then the level layouts and everything kind of plays like a Metroidvania too. So, and the level designs and everything, and the rewarding exploration and finding items and all to unlock new areas, I thought all of that was really well done. So a Batman done really well as a Metroidvania. If you listen to anything I said, those are some of the things that I really enjoy. That's why this game was just like a dream come true almost. There was just one knock against the game, and without giving too much, I'll just say that I wasn't completely happy with the way the game concluded, that it kind of set it back some for me. Not a whole lot, but it was kind of like, but not horrible, like I said, and it's not definitely a deal breaker, but definitely was one of my favorite games of this year. And yeah, I just, absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed this game. Running on the Unreal Engine 3, typically games that ran on this engine would be better on the Xbox 360. I can say I played the PlayStation 3 version of this game, and I had fun with it back then. I didn't really see any issues. My understanding is that the Xbox 360 version plays slightly smoother. Excuse me, but like I said, Xbox or PlayStation 3 was where I played it, and I had a fun enough time with it there. And I think even the PlayStation 3 version had a bit of an exclusivity to it, like maybe like a new challenge map or something like that. But yeah, either way, excellent game. I really enjoyed this game. But let's get now into some of the console exclusives here. And so on the 360, we didn't have a whole lot, but we did have some that were at least exclusive up to this point. And when I say exclusive, I'm talking about like console, right? Some of these games might have come out on PC also, but I'm just talking about consoles. So we had Left 4 Dead 2. So this was a sequel to the multiplayer zombie game that came out, I think, maybe a year or two ago or so. I'm not familiar with this series here. I just know that it was really beloved by a lot of people, and the sequel seemed to just be better overall than the first one, from what I understand. So yeah, that was pretty cool for fans of this series, right? We had Forza Motorsport 3, which is, another game in the series, right? That was cranking them out. Again, when Gran Turismo seemed to be falling behind, right, on releasing games. And yeah, more of the same from what I understand. Just a great racing game series. And here was another one on the Xbox 360. But an interesting game though that came out, and this is another indie game that I really got into, was for Shadow Complex. So this game, I mean, I guess you can say it's an indie game, but it was kind of like, it was blurring the line between an indie game and a AAA game because it was running on the Unreal Engine 3, but it's a 2D, a 2.5D Metroidvania style game. And so it had a really interesting look to it. And yeah, this game is excellent. I really enjoyed this game. It's a great Metroidvania game, and by that I mean again, the level layouts and all that are really well done. It gives you a great sense of exploration where the items matter that you get in it, and how it lets you unlock new areas. And so, but it's set like in a modern setting, so you play like this. I'll just say that you and your girlfriend are out exploring, but then eventually you get stuck into this enemy base and get caught up in this whole conspiracy of like military politics and all kinds of weird stuff and all that, right? With like secret agents and things like that. And as you set out to rescue your girlfriend and all, you're exploring this labyrinth enemy base, and the level layouts and all are done really well. The main character is voiced by Nolan North, and yeah, just a great game. I mean, I really enjoyed this game as a Metroidvania, and one of the better games that I played this year as well too. And again, this is where I started getting into the idea of like games on the Xbox Live and PSN, between this and Bionic Commando. As yeah, really enjoyed these games here, and yeah, just a great overall game. But another big game that came out on the 360 for this year was Halo 3 ODST. My understanding is that this is sort of like a side game, right, to the Halo 3 game, but it still seems like it was pretty well done. I don't think you play Master Chief in this one, but I mean, I remember it seemed like people were really liking it back then, but I don't have a whole lot of familiarity with it. I'll need to try to beat this game at some point, but yeah, I mean, it was one of the few Xbox exclusives, right, that came out during the stretch here. But then we jump over to the Wii, and so the Wii had some stuff, and speaking of like downloadable games and all. So the WiiWare, which was Nintendo's version of like online storefront where you can buy like original games on it, because there was a virtual console where you can buy like retro games, and the WiiWare where you can buy like original indie games, right? And so two games that I remember playing during this stretch here that I thought were pretty cool were from old legacy games, and that's for Contra Rebirth and Castlevania Rebirth. So Contra Rebirth, it's kind of a mishmash of a lot of the old Contra games, but it is an original game though, and it's cool. It's 2D sprite based. It plays really well. It's pretty short, but it's a lot of fun. And so yeah, I mean, if you like Contra, definitely this was a worthwhile game checking out. It's a lot of fun, and yeah, I mean, great stuff. Yeah, it was really cool. And Castlevania Rebirth is a 2D Castlevania game. And this one, my understanding is that I believe it's like a remake of the first Castlevania game that came out on the Game Boy. I think. Something to that extent. Like, I don't think it's a completely original game. I think it's based off of that. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding of it. But either way, it's a cool 2D Castlevania game, and so yeah, it was kind of cool that Konami gave some love to the WiiWare, right, with these original games. Well, more or less original on the WiiWare there. But a cool kind of like so one thing that the Wii was pretty cool at doing though, right, because they had a handful of these kind of games, was like light gun style games, because you can use the Wiimote, right, kind of like a light gun. And so that was pretty cool. And so like there was a House of the Dead 2 and 3 that came out on the system here, right, which were ports of like, the older games. And so that was pretty cool there. And there was also this one here, the House of the Dead Overkill. And I've played a bit of this game, and it's pretty cool because it kind of has like this grindhouse horror, gory sort of look to it. They're cussing galore in this game, so it's kind of funny playing this game on the Wii, right, which tends to be more family friendly oriented. But yeah, I mean, if you like gun games and the House of the Dead, this is definitely a cool game. It's bloody as hell. It's very gory, very mature rated, and yeah, a lot of fun. Like I said, if you have any interest in these kind of games, this is definitely a must play on it. But then we had an update to Wii Sports with Wii Sports Resorts, and I didn't play this one, but my understanding it just adds some new games to the Wii Sports lineup of games. I believe, well, like the name says, right, you're on some kind of a resort, and so that expands out like on the number of games you can play on there. So yeah, I mean, it was popular back then, but I just don't have a whole lot of experience with it otherwise. But what I did have some experience with was Punch-Out! And so I was really happy that this game came out finally, as I feel like this is a series from Nintendo that just gets overlooked a lot. And so as far as, this is the last one that we got as far as like a mainline game in this series here. And it's a lot of fun. It looks really nice. The characters are cel shaded and they still retain like the really colorful, crazy personalities. And it's a lot of fun, but because of the way it controls, it's not quite as responsive as say like Punch-Out! Or Super Punch-Out! Were. But it's still, like I said, it's still fun, and it has a few different control schemes you can play this game on. So you can play with the nunchuck and the Wiimote, right? So you're basically like, like actually jabbing with the controllers, right, and all to make the motion to punch. And you can also play it, I believe, where you have the controller sideways for a more authentic feel to the game. And then also, if you had the Wii Fit, the balance board, I believe you can play it on there as well too. Also, I don't know if I tried it that way or not, but either way though, it's a fun game, definitely worth playing. And yeah, just more Punch-Out! I mean, I don't know if I don't think I like it more than the original Punch-Out!, and certainly not more than Super Punch-Out!, but it's still a really fun game and definitely one of the better games on the Wii for me, at least during the stretch here. And it's a game that I just don't hear a whole lot about anymore. And I mean, again, it'd be kind of a hard game to port over. No, I guess you can do it like with maybe the gyro aiming on the Nintendo, the Joy-Cons. I mean, sure, there's a way to do that, but anyways, I wish it would re-release these games, but yeah, they're really a lot of fun, and I felt that this one was pretty good too also. But we got another 2D Mario game, and so this was the first 2D Mario game that came out for console. Excuse me, because we had the new Super Mario Brothers lineup of games now that were coming out that started on the Nintendo DS, and now we got this version on the Wii. And I mean, it's more or less the same. It's, it's 2D Mario, 2.5D Mario anyways. Plays pretty fun. And this one here, one of the main gimmicks of it is that you get like this sort of like a helicopter helmet, right? And if you wiggle the remote or so, if I recall right, and all that helps you like light up or something like that. And I mean, it's fun. It's, the new Super Mario Brothers lineup of games, because there was a few more that came out in the years later. They're pretty cool. I mean, they don't play bad. They play just fine. It's just that I felt that they were a little uninspired though. And so kind of makes it hard to differentiate them from each other. As sometimes I forget, I was like, what did this one do? And what did this one do? But it was 2D Mario, not bad. And I mean, if you like Mario games and all, definitely a must buy for the Wii system here. But probably the coolest thing that came out on the Wii, and wasn't actually an original game, but it was a compilation of previous games. And that was the Metroid Prime Trilogy package. So this was really cool. Because so I talked about Metroid Prime 3 Corruption earlier, like 2 episodes ago, I believe. And so that game, I feel like it's been one of the better implementations of the Wiimote. I thought that what they did with the Wiimote in that game was pretty cool. So what this game does is that it's a bundle set where it has Metroid Prime, the first one, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and Metroid Prime 3 Corruption all in one package. Now, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, same thing, right? It's just now included with the other 2 games. But Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes now have motion controls on them. I mean, it wasn't quite as well implemented as in Corruption 3, because that game was made specifically to have motion controls. But I will say, though, that playing Part 1 and 2 with motion controls was definitely a cool experience. And in many ways, I prefer this control scheme over like your traditional control scheme. At least what was available up to this point. Because once later on, right, we had ways of playing Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 with dual analog stick. But up to this point, I think I preferred playing it with the Wiimote. It just made for a fun, really immersive experience. And one of the cool things about the Metroid games that I've already gushed about earlier, right, before, is that how it feels really immersive being in, inside like Samus's shoes, literally, right, in the first person perspective. But now with the Wiimote controls and all, it kind of gave it a sense almost like if you were playing in VR. And I really like that, right, because it really got you really immersed in this alien setting here that I thought was really cool. But definitely a must-buy package if you had the Nintendo Wii and had any interest in Metroid games. Eventually, this package got pretty expensive, but you could buy it on the Nintendo Wii U shop also as well too for fairly cheap, well, before it closed. But definitely just a cool package, and I would say definitely one of the better compilation of video game packages that have been released. Just again because it gave you 3 great games and also gave you a cool new control scheme to them as well too, right? So yeah, definitely for me one of the more must-buy games of the Wii generation here. But then jumping on to the PlayStation 3, and for this one I wanted to start it off with kind of what I'm talking about with Metroid Prime the trilogy, is that, so again, we're starting to get to the point where we wanted to try to experience old games again. And so that was being done through, like, for example, some games getting re-released, like on things like the Virtual Console or Xbox Live Arcade, or we were getting like brand new remakes of them. So, for example, like Bionic Commando, like I talked about earlier, or we were getting games kind of packaged in all in one, right? So kind of like Metroid Prime Trilogy. Now that one kind of went out of its way to give you a new control scheme and all. But like on the PlayStation 3, we had the God of War collection. And what this is God of War 1 and 2 that came out on the PlayStation 2, only now in high definition. And so at the time, I thought this was great, right? Because it's like we're taking some old games and bringing them up to speed with modern standards at the time as far as like resolution goes, and gives you a way to play the game on a modern system that was out at the time. And so again, at this time, that concept had been overdone, right? Where we're just getting a bunch of remakes and remasters. And so it was pretty cool. And so for that, I feel like I wanted to include this game here just because it was one of the first experiences that I had where I'm playing like a remaster of a game, right? They came out from a previous generation, cleaned up the graphics and all. And I thought for the most part, it was pretty well done. Was this one done by Blue Point? Okay, yes. Yeah. So Blue Point had a hand in making this collection here. You know, so again, right, you know, with everything we talked about Blue Point already. But yeah, I just thought it was cool, right? You know, it just... It just, you know, it felt like a novel concept back at the time, right? And now where we can still play old games on new hardware. And so this is the generation that I feel like we were really kind of leaning into that more and more, right? As, you know, time started going on, because, you know, we were enjoying the new stuff that was coming out, but we were starting to get a little nostalgic, right, for the previous stuff. And there's already been a lot of game consoles that have come out up to this point. And so we're like, okay, well, you know, if we can play a game, if we can play these old games somehow on modern hardware, that'd be cool. So we don't have a whole bunch of stuff connected, you know, to our TVs. And I mean, I know some people have the space for that and all, which is cool, but you know, not everyone has that ability, right? And also just more ways to play older games in a more convenient way was always pretty cool. But another cool like indie game that we got at this time that was available through digital was Trine. And so this is a interesting 2.5D puzzle game where you control 3 characters, and that's a wizard, a knight, and a thief. And the way you use their abilities to solve puzzles and get through the levels and all was really fun. And so for me personally, the Trine 1 and 2, what I've played of them, they're some of my more favorite puzzle-like games. And they kind of remind me of like the Lost Vikings from back in the 4th generation, but just only now in a more medieval setting. And yeah, fun games. And I thought that the look of the game and all was really cool looking too as well. And has cool music and a cool art style to it and almost like a storybook fantasy setting to it. And yeah, it was pretty fun. But an exclusive game, though, on the PlayStation 3 that became for me one of the better exclusives on this system was Infamous. And so this game, it's a superhero game that kind of like that prototype game that I talked about earlier. It's an original superhero game, not relying on another property of some sort. And so you play this character named Cole who gets embedded with these lightning powers. And so the way that, and it's set in this open world setting. And so the way you use this lightning powers to get around and attack your enemies and all is really cool. And it's set like in this fictional city. And so kind of has because of that, it kind of has like a DC Comics vibe to it to an extent. But it's definitely its own thing. And yeah, a lot of fun. I mean, it's a big part of the fun of the game is just getting to explore the city and attacking your enemy and getting around with your lightning powers as you can grind on like, on train rails and on electric wires and all. And as you power up your character, right? Some of the lightning powers that you can unleash is a whole lot of fun, but it has some pretty cool missions and that you can do. And the story is actually pretty well done in this one. And I remember just, playing it all the way through the end. I was like, wow, that's a good story. Like that was like, I was satisfied with that part of it as well too. And so just definitely made for one of the cooler PlayStation 3 exclusives that you can play during this stretch here. And yeah, just a great time with this game. Some of the side characters and all are, they're pretty cool in it. It has a pretty cool music to it. And I remember this is another game too. I've talked about it a bit before, where some of the, like a song that plays at the end, I thought was really cool and like kind of like a licensed track. So there was a Mass Effect that had a cool song at the very end, like as the credits are rolling. Mirror's Edge also had a really cool song, and then this one as well too. And so anyway, it's just a cool little tidbit there, right? And all for a little treat for when you beat the game. But yeah, Infamous, really, really fun game. I'd kind of want to go back and go back through this game here at some point. I had a lot of fun with it, and it did, the frame rate did struggle a bit, right? Like with a lot of games during this generation, especially as you get into the more busier open world section of the game. But it would really benefit from like a 60 frames per second patch of some sort. And yeah, but this is another game too that you can play it through streaming on the PlayStation Plus subscription, but it's streaming, right? Because the only other way to play this game natively is just on the PlayStation 3. So again, another reason why I've been keeping that system around still. But Infamous, yeah, really cool game. I had a lot of fun with this game. But then we had Demon Souls. So we talked a little bit about this game already before, but this is the first game in what would become like these Souls-like games that From Software pretty much, created. And this game here, from my understanding, it was a PlayStation exclusive, and so that's why eventually the series went with a different name, or different just overall franchise, as because they ended up going multi-platform, right? But this one was a PlayStation exclusive, and so you play this night, and eventually you get killed, and so then your soul, so to speak, right, is out there attacking these monstrosities and all. And really difficult game. This is pretty much where this genre started, and I like the concept to it and all. I've already talked a lot about these Souls-like games. And at some point I hope to get good, as they say, because I love the lore to it, the story, the bosses and all, but it is a very difficult game. And this one here, so this particular version, the only place you can play it on still is on the PlayStation 3, unless you're going for the remake, right? But like I talked about earlier, from people that are hardcore into the series, it seems like the remake didn't quite nail down a lot of the aspects of this original one here. So just something to keep in mind if you want to play this game. Maybe look up some videos and all of how the differences between the two. And as seems like for a lot of hardcore people, they seem to prefer more this one over the remake one. But there was also Killzone 2. And so we finally got this game that came out that I mentioned before, I believe, when the PlayStation 3 was first being unveiled, and they were showing demos of this game that at first they were stating that like if it was running on real-time graphics, but it was actually more CG. And while the actual final product didn't quite look like that, it still looked amazing though. And definitely one of the most detailed looking games of this generation. Killzone 2 looks amazing. It's the graphics engine that it's running on, really incredible, and definitely showed that Guerrilla Games was a top-tier PlayStation developer, as they can really pump out some amazing visuals. And so the setting is kind of like still like the first one, right? Where it's like you're fighting these Hellgas, which are sort of like space Nazis, almost, you can think of it. But it's kind of cool though, because even though it is sci-fi, but it still has a grounded feel because they still look like humans. And yeah, cool overall setting, very gritty, very dark, but an amazing detail to the levels and all, and plays pretty well. But it plays different though, where it's as you're moving around, there's sort of like a heavy feel to the game where, it's not as snappy as say like something like Call of Duty. But I like that though, because it gave it a different sort of taste to the game, right? For first-person shooters, where it didn't just play like any other first-person shooter. And it's got a cool sci-fi setting to it and all that I really enjoyed. And yeah, cool game overall. It does kind of struggle a little bit in the frame rate department again. So this is another series that I wish would get a remake of some sort. Part of the reason why I still keep my PlayStation 3 around is because of this game here and its sequel, which we'll talk about that later. But yeah, Killzone 2, not quite what that original demo showed off, but still pretty cool though overall, and definitely probably outside of like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, probably my favorite first person shooter of this year here. But my favorite game of the year, though, was Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. And so again, right, it takes what the first one did, and Uncharted Drake's Fortune, but really improves on so much about it. The gameplay is just more fine-tuned, so the gunplay, the platforming, and all just feels better. The overall level layouts and everything, it's a lot more varied, as now you're traveling to various parts of the globe instead of just in a jungle area. And so for that, it keeps everything fresh, and definitely one of the better paced games of all time, in my opinion. And by that, I mean is that every section of the game, it just feels really fresh and fun, and you're doing something new. And between a combination of the gameplay, the story, the banter between the characters and all, and it just feels like it's constantly evolving on itself, and has probably one of the best stages of all time in a video game with the train section. Because what I liked about it is that the way it looks, the way everything plays out, how it ties to the story, and it's fairly lengthy, but without overstaying its welcome. Uncharted 2 is an amazing game. One of my favorite action games of all time. The story overall, it's expanded on more, which, it's, between Nolan North, still doing the voiceover for Nathan Drake, and Victor Sullivan, and, Lena Fisher, and then with newcomer Chloe. All of it just feels really good. And then also the bad guy too. Also, I mean, it's done really well. It just feels like a damn movie, right? I mean, it's so well produced and all. And this is here still where so Naughty Dog started going through a transformation, and it kind of started a little bit after this game. But this game here, I believe it still had Amy Hennig as the main writer, I believe. I could be wrong on that. Let me see. Okay, yeah, so Amy Hennig still had quite a bit of a hand in this one here, as she was one of the directors along with Bruce Straley, and then looks like she seems to be like the main writer on it as well too. And so what I liked about it is that this and the first one, what I really liked is that they definitely felt like these pulp adventures, right? Where they were really, grand in scope as far as the adventure goes in it, and wasn't taking itself too completely serious, but serious when it needed to be. And I don't know, just something about the feel of this game, the gameplay, the settings to it, and the overall story structure and all, the characterization and everything, I felt was just probably the best done in this one here for me personally, and just had a great time with this game. And yeah, definitely my favorite game of this year. And yeah, again, took what the first game started, but just amped it up even more, and just made for a really great time. I mean, just the way the game starts out really leaves you with like this intrigue, right? Like, what is going on, right? And then the payoff to it on, like I said, right, on how, with the train level, it just, the way it pays off and all, is just really incredible. And just one of the more polished games out there. Definitely started showing that Naughty Dog was an incredible developer, right? I mean, we had already known that before, but I feel like at this point in time, this was like their magnum opus. Is that how you say it? Magnum opus? And yeah, just an incredible game. And it just started showing like the programming wizardry that these guys had was just truly on another level, because like all the little details in the game on how your character animates, the landscape and all look truly stunning, was running at a much smoother frame rate, still at 30 frames per second, but much smoother than what we had in the previous game. And yeah, just a lot of fun. I just really, really enjoyed this game here. But yeah, that's what I got there for exclusives. And so wanted to end off on a particular game here that, I mean, this game, it's not something that I'm completely interested in or invested in, but the rest of the world seems to be. And so wanted to give this game a spotlight here because of that, because it is very important as far as video game history goes. And also because my daughter's really into this game. Excuse me. So Layla, if you're ever listening to this years later, right, as you're older and, you happen to, see what the heck your daddy was talking about in the room, early Sunday mornings, here you go. This one's for you also, as we are going to be talking about Minecraft here. And so Minecraft is a huge game, right? I'm pretty sure it's the highest selling video game of all time. I'm not too familiar with it as far as like the overall creation of this game and everything. So wanted to shine a bit of a spotlight on this game here and talk about it a bit as I'm looking up some information on it, just so I can have it recorded right in my little podcast here, right? Because again, it is hugely important to the overall history of video games. But let's talk about Minecraft. as this is the year that the game originated in. The game went through various iterations of it, and then eventually got ported over to new consoles, and then got out of its alpha phase and all this, from my understanding. But this is the year that it started in, so let's just kind of go into it here and start talking about Minecraft. That way, I don't have to worry about trying to talk about it in the later years, right? Because again, its relevancy only grew as years went on, basically. But Minecraft is a sandbox game developed and published by Mojang Studios. Following its public initial release or public alpha release in 2009, it was formally released in 2011 for personal computers. The game has since been ported to numerous platforms, including mobile devices and various video game consoles. Minecraft players explore a procedurally generated world with virtually infinite terrain made up of voxels or cubes. They can discover and extract raw materials, craft tools and items, build structures, fight hostile mobs, and cooperate with or compete against other players in multiplayer. The game's large community offers a wide variety of user-generated content, such as modifications, servers, player skins, texture packs, and custom maps, which add new game mechanics and possibilities. Originally created by Marcus Notch Persson using the Java programming language, Jens Jeb Bergensten was handed control over the game's development during its full release. In 2014, Mojang and the Minecraft intellectual property were purchased by Microsoft for $2.5 billion US dollars. Xbox Game Studios holds the publishing rights for the Bedrock Edition, the unified cross-platform version, which evolved from the Pocket Edition codebase and replaced the legacy console versions. Bedrock is updated concurrently with Mojang's original Java edition, although with numerous generally small differences. Minecraft, okay, here we go. So Minecraft is the best-selling video game in history with over 350 million copies sold. It has received critical acclaim, winning several awards and being cited as one of the greatest video games of all time. Social media, parodies, adaptations, merchandise, and the annual Minecon conventions have played prominent roles in popularizing it. The wider Minecraft franchise includes several spin-off games, such as the Minecraft Story Mode, Minecraft Dungeons, and Minecraft Legends. A film adaptation titled A Minecraft Movie was released in 2025 and became the second highest grossing video game film of all time. So yeah, suffice to say, Minecraft is huge, right? And so the gameplay, it's basically, so you're in the sandbox, right, and all, and I mean, the main version of this game, or from what I understand, there's really no like specific end goal. You're just basically creating, kind of think, I mean, the very basic terms on how to describe this game is virtual Legos. I mean, really, right? You can pretty much, I mean, the block, it's a very blocky looking game, and almost looks like blocky pixelated graphics. So almost kind of think about like an 8-bit game come to life in 3D, right? It's kind of what it looks like. But I mean, you can pretty much create whatever you want to, as far as your imagination goes, because it gives you quite a wide variety of tools, and it really streamlines the controls and all, where that can seem a little intimidating at first, but once you start playing it, I mean, it's pretty easy to pick up and play and just start creating stuff. There is like a survival mode that you can do, which I believe introduces like certain enemies to it and all, but creepers, I think they're called. Yeah, I mean, you can build anything from like houses to trees to whatever your heart's content, and then fill them up with like what my daughters like to do. They like to build like a tree house, and then you just fill it up with axolotls in there. It's kind of funny. And it's a very, I mean, like I said, it's not something that I'm really, completely invested in. I like every now and then playing it with my daughter, just building stuff and all. Because when I do get into it, it is kind of a peaceful, relaxing time. You're just building stuff and all. And, sometimes it can I can see how it can be a little addicting, right? Just creating things. Again, it's not something though that I generally lean towards wanting to play, but it's a video game though that I don't have mind too much when my girls play it, just because it's really, teaching them creativity and how to build things and all. And I feel that that's a positive thing there. And, they love playing it multiplayer, right? Where they'll just, build things and, kind of enjoy each other's creations and all. And yeah, I mean, it's, I mean, there's been the game just gets continuously updated. I mean, I swear every time I boot up the game on the Xbox, it seems like it's doing some kind of an update of some sort. So whatever's going on in the background, obviously the game is still being, maintained really well. And it became one of like, I would say that this is probably the start, I could be wrong, but of like these forever games, right? Where I was just talking about it earlier, where one of the games that is still as like that has the highest player count is still Minecraft, because people are still playing this to this day and in high numbers. And it's just because it's a game, it started changing the fact of like, I mean, we've already been kind of seeing games like this, like, World of Warcraft or, things like that, where you can just play these games for almost seemingly forever. But this is kind of taking it to another level there. And or this is what people will just play. They'll just get in there and just keep playing it and playing it and playing it. And granted, like updates and all that help, but I think it's just the concept of the game, like Legos, for example, right? Anybody can just jump in and start playing Legos, because you're not really following a story, whatever. You just build whatever you want. Sure, you can build, if it's a Lego, like a set, right? You build your set and you're done. But if you're just talking about just Legos in general, you could just keep playing and playing and playing it, right? Well, kind of the same thing with Minecraft. And so for that there, like I said, I am not the biggest Minecraft player, but I can definitely appreciate what this game has done for the video game industry, outside of like the online component of it and all, where, you unfortunately have to deal with real life creepers, right? It's a game that I don't mind, like my daughter's playing like in single player mode and all, or at least, local co-op, because I do feel, like I said, right, and all, that there's a benefit for them to express their creativity, and they love it. And just seeing them, laugh and, as they're playing the game and all, I mean, I feel bad sometimes because my daughter sometimes wants me to play with it. I'm like, I'm not really into playing Minecraft too much. It's funny because she'll tell my wife to also, right? And my wife is like, no thanks, right? And but if anything though, I really love watching their faces, right, as they're creating things and just having a fun time. Like I said, loading up their little houses with axolotls and, and just creating their things. And they're actually getting pretty good with it. And also, and, and they're fairly young still too. So again, so I guess that's what I'm saying, Ed, is that it's very user friendly. Or like my daughter's picked it up pretty easily, right? And all pretty much anyone can that has an interest in it. So, I mean, kudos to Minecraft. It is definitely became legendary as far as how it really popularized video games. Well, it said it right there, right? It's the highest grossing game of all time. Sold tons of copies, still relevant to this day. Not only relevant, but like amongst the highest played games, still going strong to this day. And it's been out since, since this version, if we're counting like when it first initially released, in its pre-alpha phase or whatever I said earlier in 2009. I mean, we're talking about what, 17 years? Jesus, right? So, like I said, right? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, right? This is what they're looking at, right? This is what a lot of companies are looking at as far as what are people playing, and they keep wanting to do something like this. And the thing is that something like Minecraft was like lightning in a bottle, not to say that there can't be another kind of game like this that just hooks players forever. A certain shooter game that comes out, some years later is an example of that. But but this is where a lot of people want to play nowadays. And right. And so because of Minecraft, it sort of spawned this new generation of gamers, right? Where they're, playing something like this, and this is where they're at, right? This is where they're going to play with their friends. They're going to have a fun time. And so that's cool and all, right? I mean, I get it. It's that this is going to be their nostalgia. It's just that I just wish that not every company wanted to try to chase this golden goose, right? It's just, you're only going to get so many games out there like this, and to try to, make that your focus of all the, the mainline games that are coming out, like Sony seems to be trying to do, I just don't think it's the best plan. But anyways, I already talked about that. For what it is, Minecraft, absolutely legendary. I haven't seen the movie yet. I bought it for my daughter. She kind of watched it and she thought it was kind of like okay. So I don't know, Layla, if you're watching years later, maybe comment about how you originally felt about the Minecraft movie. But it's definitely became popular, right? And yeah, for that, just wanted to give it its due here. But that's what I got here for 2009. Hope you enjoyed this episode, or at least it gave you a bit of nostalgia or some information, or maybe just a distraction in the background. Next week, we will start talking about the year 2010 and what that brought to video games. And there was certainly a lot of cool games. There was a lot of cool games that came out in 2010. There was a certain sequel that continued on a really great sci-fi epic. And there was also a new game in the Final Fantasy world, along with going to the Wild Wild West, and also another game where we're taking on some Greek gods. So we will see you next week with next year's edition of 2010. And until then, stay safe and take care of yourselves, and we will see you in the next one. Have a good one.